Welcome once again to Cinemaholics, where we talk about the biggest and best films coming to theaters and streaming online. From the San Francisco Bay Area, I am John Negroni, film editor for The Young Folks, co-creator of Cinemaholics, and film critic for Reports Watching the Spool. From Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, he is a pop culture writer for Cinema Blend, our other Cinemaholics co-creator as well. It's Will Ashton.
Hey there.
You can find more episodes of Cinemaholics, including our full archive, on cinemaholics.com, including written reviews and other bonus content. You can write into the show anytime by sending us an email, cinemaholicspodcast@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. And if you'd like to support our show, help us keep the fun going, please head on over to patreon.com/cinemaholics. We also have Cinemaholics merch you can purchase on our website, cinemaholics.com. So get yourself a hoodie, mug, t-shirt, shot glass, whatever you like. Links to all that and more are in the show notes. So, Will, I have to apologize to the listeners before we get started. I'm in a new environment. I moved, and I haven't figured out the acoustics of everything, so I probably sound a little off. I probably sound very different.
Well, I forgive you, John. If the listeners will forgive you, we'll find out.
I was gonna say, because I know you'll forgive me because you're kind and true. But our listeners, they're tougher to please. They demand the very best at every possible junction, so we'll see what happens. But well, hopefully next week we'll have the audio stuff all figured out. But yeah, Will, kind of heck of a week to have all of this audio drama, because we have a lot of cinema drama for sure. It feels like so many movies came out this past week, like not just like every week it feels like there's a whole bunch, but usually it's like a lot of smaller films or mid-budget films. This week it's a lot of everything, it feels like. And we're only covering 4 films this week. We're going to talk about The Tomorrow War, which just hit Amazon Prime Video. We're going to talk about Zola, the A24 Sundance darling, Summer of Soul, another Sundance darling, a music documentary. And then we'll finish out the show with No Sudden Move, which is just this crime thriller that Steven Soderbergh threw together real fast for us. So it's a whole lot of stuff to talk about, but there's so much more we aren't even going to get into, but we're going to talk about a little bit in off topics.
Yeah, I mean, we got one movie that's rah rah America, rah rah. One movie, I guess technically 2 movies about the American dream, and then one movie that's just about the U.S. of A. in a roundabout sort of way. So, very America-friendly episode this week.
I guess, well, yeah, it's July 4th weekend. I hope you had, for our American friends of the show, we're Americans, but I know a lot of people listen to the show outside of the States, but yes, we are celebrating Independence Day for the USA. Will, I hope you had a great July 4th weekend.
It was pretty good. How was yours?
It was chaotic because I've been moving, as you know.
Sure.
It's good to hopefully be settled and figure all this stuff out. It's just this is a big move, I feel like I move all the time, but this is one of the bigger ones.
This is I guess you're gonna have to call my good friend Max Keeble, because you got a big move.
Oh yeah,
there you go.
He knows all about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, a couple of the films that neither of us saw, but are big enough to mention here. First, we have America, the Motion Picture, which I think, when I first told you about this, you hadn't even heard about it, but it's one of a few. You had, maybe I'm thinking of somebody else, but yeah, this is the new Netflix film. It technically came out on June 30th, so it came out a little bit ago. This is an adult animation kind of parody of the Founding Fathers, and Matt Thompson directed it. And I don't know if you're super familiar with Matt Thompson's work, but I think the whole
did Archer, or a little bit of Archer,
yes.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, so the producers of this thing, including him, include people who are behind Archer, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, The Expendables, and funny enough, Magic Mike. And I haven't looked into this film much, but I have heard it is absolutely atrocious. And I have also heard that it is hilarious, which you seem to take issue with. You don't think that could possibly be true?
That's not what I said. I'm just hearing uniformly negative things so far. I have not really heard anyone say anything more positive than like, yeah, it was kind of dumb, but I enjoyed it. That's probably the most affectionate praise I've heard so far for the film. Otherwise, it's just been a lot of damning criticism.
Sure. I'm intrigued by it because, I mean, the idea of Channing Tatum voicing George Washington, just, wow. I'm absolutely interested in something like that. Jason Mantzoukas apparently voices Sam Adams, and Thomas Edison is voiced, obviously, by Olivia Munn. So, yeah, I think it's my kind of movie. It's a shame to hear that it might not live up, though, to the standards that voice cast presents.
Yeah, I think Killer Mike is also a voice in the film, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't know about that, but that
Sure.
would be better than the alternative. So,
Okay.
but yeah, we were obviously, we didn't watch this one, but it is available on Netflix. Another film. This is a really big film. I was supposed to see this, but I had a conflict because, so I was supposed to see this at a screening, the Forever Purge, the latest Purge movie, and I was gonna go see it, but then the Tomorrow War screeners came out. And I originally thought like, oh yeah, Tomorrow War, I'll be able to watch that tonight. But then there was like this email that was like kind of cryptic. It was like, you gotta start the Tomorrow War at this time. You have to like tie your shoes 5 minutes beforehand.
Oh, John.
And you have to call up Bobby Moynihan. Yeah, that clearly.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. I started the movie and it was like, you can't, like, if you stop watching it, you can't pause it, and then you lose access to the screening. And I was like, well, shoot, I can't finish it in time to finish it and then go see Forever Purge. I had to make a call.
I tried to warn you, John. I told you about these Amazon screeners, that you don't have to start them on the time, but if you start them, you can't stop them. And I don't know, maybe next time you'll heed my warnings.
You didn't say any of that stuff. You were just like, I don't know what's going to happen.
I told you that, because I've gotten Amazon screeners for a couple things recently, like Coming to America and Without Remorse, and I think something else. And I know that you don't have to, like, they give you like a date that you can watch it by, but you don't have to start it as soon as you get the screener. But if you start the screener, that's like, you can like maybe pause it a couple times, but after a while you have to finish it or else you'll lose it. But
see, I got those screeners too for both those movies, and it wasn't like that for either of those. And apparently it's like some people get different types. This is my first time getting that kind. And I'm just saying, when I brought it up, you didn't seem as sure and confident about it as you do right now. If you had told me, if you had been this like, John, don't worry about it, I would have been fine. But I was just like I was throwing darts, and with a blindfold on.
Admittedly, at the time I was dealing with something, but yeah, I was pretty sure. I mean, I didn't know what your setup was, so I didn't want to steer you astray, but I was pretty certain that the setup that you had was similar to mine, and lo and behold, it sounds like it was.
I know what you were dealing with.
Stress?
You had a feeling that the Purge was actually going to happen.
Oh, no. Oh, man. Well, I've heard the new Purge is not very good.
Wait. Hold on. Slow down.
Sure.
It's a Purge movie. You're telling me there's a Purge movie coming out that the critics don't like?
Yeah, would you believe it? There's a new Purge, the last Purge, I guess, supposedly, that's out now in theaters only.
Eternal Purge, yeah.
Well, now you gave them an idea for how they can continue the franchise. They go throughout history and complete the Purge once more in a kind of space-time continuum. I'm assuming that's what the next one will be. But no, I guess this is like the Purge is no longer a thing, but people have been emboldened by the past purges to be like, we're just going to do the Purge again. And people are like, but that's just murder. And it's like, well, spade's a spade.
I thought the premise was that the Purge was still going on, and you'll have to forgive me because I have completely lost track of what the Purge movies are at this point. I think this is like the fifth one, and I know they said this would be the final one. But didn't they say that for this movie, it was more like the Purge is still going on, but then like instead of after the Purge, everybody being like, we did it, we purged all of our murder.
You purged the Purge
out of our bodies, which is sure, yeah. But then people are like, no. We're gonna do an extra day of the Purge, like they're teenagers at a lock-in,
Okay.
And it's a morning, and they refuse to go to bed.
Yeah, I think that's similar to what I was saying. I might have been led astray. I haven't
You were
seen
kind of saying like you were saying like, oh, the Purge, they don't do the Purge anymore. But then people were like, we're gonna do the Purge again.
The Purge, I thought, in this new one, but then people just continue to do the Purge because they're like, I thought that's what the premise was. I haven't seen any trailers or anything beyond the poster.
I have the synopsis in front of me. It says here that the new founding fathers of America have regained control of the U.S. government and reinstituted the annual purge with its original rules. So, listeners, this is why when like Will tells me how screeners work, I don't just be like, oh yeah, Will's shooting straight.
So the new founding fathers. So I'm assuming that's Channing Tatum and the crew from America the Motion Picture.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, live action, of course, but it's all connected. No, so this movie is directed by Alvaro Valerio Gaut, and yeah, I mean, it's another action horror purge movie. I mean, I'm not like hurting because I didn't see this. I have heard that Tena Cuerta is in it and it's very good. And then, but you know, Josh Lucas, Ena de la Guerra. I mean, sure. Like, I don't know. I would be willing to see this in a theater because I like dumb horror action movies in general, and it's summer and this is what I do in the summer. But, you know, I don't have any pretensions, right? Like, that's fine. I'll watch a movie like this, but I'm not feeling like I missed out on anything. Like I don't think I'm gonna like rush out to catch up on this.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen the past 4 Purge films, and I thought the first 2 were shrug-worthy, and the third one was like almost there. Like I remember thinking they're on the right track. Maybe the fourth one will be the one that gets it finally. And then the fourth one was probably my least favorite of all of them because it was like a prequel, and it had an interesting concept, but like all these other movies, they just don't really have the writing to back it up. And then the fifth one, I couldn't tell you if it's any good or not. It sounds like it's not. I've heard that the character on the poster is not in the film. It's like a cowboy.
Well, I heard he's in it for like 2 seconds. That's the joke people are making. Like he shows up, he's in like 2 frames, and that's it.
That's a bummer.
It's next level marketing right there. Yeah, the Purge movies, you know, just to, you know, break it down for people, they've come out many a summer, you know. Now there's 5 of them. First one comes out 2013, directed by James DeMonico, you know, our Lord and Savior, James, King James, excuse me. And that's a different. I forgot you're not part of the religion. But he created the Purge franchise, like it was like his baby, and then he directs the first 3 movies: Purge Anarchy and Purge Election Year, which I agree with you. I think Purge Election Year is probably the strongest. Like it gets close to being like its commentary actually being kind of interesting. Jason Blum, Michael Bay, they produce all these movies.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say that I think not only does the third one not only does it have like the most commentary to offer, but it's also the one that seems to be tonally the most assured, and it seems to acknowledge that like these movies are just very goofy, and it leans into that the most. Like the first 2, they kind of take themselves a little too self-seriously, and that one seems to kind of own up to the goofiness of the premise. And then the third one takes itself seriously again, and it's just like, well, shoot. I
mean, I do think it's funny because I mean, like Frank Grillo kind of takes over, you know, from Ethan Hawke, who shows up in the first Purge, which, you know, not the first Purge, the movie The First Purge, but the first actual Purge movie. It's
very confusing.
But Frank Grillo kind of steps in, right? But then I don't think he's in First Purge. I never saw First Purge.
He is not.
Right. So
it is Ethan Hawke and Lena Headey, I believe, are the leads of The Purge.
The Purge, yeah. First Purge is like a different cast, I think, entirely, if I'm not mistaken. I think Marissa Tomei is in it. But
she is.
I mean, these movies have been coming out like every 2 years. I think the first 2 came out within a year of each other, but then like they start cranking them out every 2 years. Forever Purge, the final, you know, the finale by a different director. I think the last one was a different director too, but Forever Purge comes out a year later because of COVID. And I don't know. I mean, it's not that they dumped it, because I mean, they're doing it in July 4th weekend, right? They did July 4th weekend for the last one, I think. And I think maybe election year too. So like clearly they have faith in this being like America. Let's like watch a horror movie about how messed up America is.
Yeah. Well, the last one was the same weekend, I remember.
Yeah. I think you're right about that. So like for this one, I don't know, I just feel like they're kind of, I didn't see a ton of marketing for this. But do you know how the box office has turned out?
I don't. Do you?
They've almost hit 20 million.
Is that good or bad?
Weekend. I mean, it's a budget of 18. Yeah. And I mean, it's not amazing, but I mean, they didn't spend a ton of money on their budget, right? So they're not going to have too many issues with breaking even, I assume.
Yeah, well, they also had the show. I remember. I think it was on USA Network, and that I don't think that lasted as long as they hoped. Like I think they were really hoping that would go for a while, and I think it lasted maybe 2 or 3 seasons. So I think people are just kind of purged out. They're purged of the purge.
I guess, but I mean, we have to admit the Purge movies were on a bit of an upswing, right? Because first Purge made more money than Purge Election Year.
But that's how
Purge Anarchy.
That's how any horror franchise tends to go, right? It's like if they're successful,
not necessarily.
More often than not, I think Blumhouse knew what was going to happen. I think they recognized they saw the writing on the wall here, and they're like, "Well, get out when the getting is good."
Sure, I mean, I think so. They're going to come out, with this one. They'll be able to chalk it up to code because I mean, I think the last one made like 100-something million. And they'll probably be like, well, yeah, of course this one did make 100-something million. It's the pandemic. But hold on, the vaccine. And the people are looking at like the box office for like all these other movies that are actually pretty strong.
Yeah.
These ones are doing better. Oh, no, don't look at those numbers. Those numbers are fake. Like that's, I think, how it's going to go down.
I think also there's something to be said about the fact that we've been living in a purge type world for the past year. And I don't think the purge itself is much of an escapism at this point. And considering how like on the nose these movies tend to be, I think people are just kind of tired. They're ready to move on. That'd be my guess, at least.
I don't know. You're getting a bit too philosophical for me.
Maybe. I just don't like. They didn't really market this one. I don't think, unless I'm just missing the marketing. I didn't see any.
Right.
Like I said,
I mean, yeah, it could have missed us both, but I haven't seen much.
So I think they were just kind of aware that, like, the Purge has overstayed its welcome as a franchise. I think people are kind of ready to move on. But the fans will show up, but otherwise, I think they've exceeded their limitations, and so it's time to start another franchise at the Blumhouse factory of movies.
I'll just say never.
Oh, they'll bring it back.
But you can say forever.
Sure.
That's our breakdown of the Purge movies, even though we didn't watch the movie. And I'm surprised we talked about it as long as we did. Real quick before we move on, here are a couple movies I did see, and I do want to shout them out real fast. I'm going to start with the one that I really want to share, because this movie, I'm a little sad we're not talking about it yet. And now I know Will and I have had a few side talks. Don't worry, Mom and Dad have been chatting about what you're getting for Christmas, and Christmas is going to come pretty early, obviously. But Fear Street, if you haven't heard, is a Netflix trilogy of films that originally was going to be coming to theaters, but I feel like we have to say this every episode of the show these days. COVID, like, the deal, like stuff happened. And also I think Fox was behind this originally. Disney bought it. All kinds of drama happened. Basically Netflix got the distribution rights last year, and instead of doing this in theaters, they were going to do it, I think, like every couple of weeks a new one was going to drop. But they changed it to now they're going to be coming out on Netflix once a week over the course of the next few weeks. The first one is called Fear Street Part 1, 1994. And it's a teen horror film. It's based on R.L. Stine's kind of like aged up Goosebumps books. He did a series called Fear Street. There's a whole bunch of these books, I think hundreds. And I don't think they're super related. I've never read them. I don't think they're super related to these movies like directly as far as I understand. But I think at least spiritually, they're kind of coming from the same well. But it did strike me as, I think, like an original story. Lee Janiak, the director of Honeymoon, which I believe, Will, you said that movie unsettled you. She directed all 3 of these films. But I went to Will and I was like, Fear Street Part 1, 1994, saw it, really dug it. But Will was like, no, I'm not going to watch this one. I'm going to wait. Will wants to do a whole bundle because, Part 2, Part 3 are coming out. I wanted to talk about it once a week, like we were instructed by the Netflix marketing agency. Will wanted to strike out on his own. So this is your chance, Will. Like, what's the plan for Fear Street? I am going to talk about it and kind of say my piece about it because I really dug it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I just wasn't really as eager to see these. I know that they were being marketed fairly heavily by Netflix, which is rare for a Netflix production. Though I guess, like you said, it's not really technically a Netflix production. Netflix is distributing it, but not involved with it behind the scenes. But nevertheless, I don't know. Just based on everything that was going on this weekend, I just figured that was one that was expendable.
I will admit, because I wrote a very positive review. I've seen some positive reviews coming out, people giving this thing like 5 stars, and I'm telling them, calm down. Like, okay, this is not a 5-star movie. It's not amazing. But it is extremely enjoyable for what it is. So part 1, 1994, as the name implies, it takes place in the 90s. And it's kind of like an homage to Scream, the 1996 film. But whereas that Wes Craven film was kind of paying itself kind of a parody homage to horror films and the structure of horror films, 1994, this Fear Street movie, is doing a 90s slasher kind of straight up. And it's like half self-aware of the slasher genre, but it also is kind of, I think, smartly infusing a little bit of Goonies energy into it. A lot of people are picking up, like, oh, this is Netflix trying to do Stranger Things in the 90s. Stranger Things, of course, being an 80s homage to kind of horror concepts that are very Stephen King and Spielberg. But I really don't think that's a super fair comparison because, first of all, this is a movie. It does feel a little episodic, and I do see Netflix's, I could totally see them sitting in the room and being like, well, yeah, this makes a lot of sense for our purposes. We know how to market something like this. We know how to get people excited about this kind of property. And I think it is a hard sell to some people because do you think slashers are in style? Because I don't. I don't see Zoomers, Gen Z, really coming out for slasher movies, right? Like the slasher genre, it's not dead, but it's not where it used to be.
Certainly not compared to the 80s and 90s, though they were kind of waning out, I feel like, in the 2000s as well. They were becoming like more like Cabin in the Woods-esque. Like they're like being self-aware, probably, like you said, a byproduct of the Scream era, making horror movies like more tongue-in-cheek and stuff like that. And I guess slasher films are seen as a little bit more retrograde by comparison. So, I mean, at some point they'll get a new wave and probably come back with a force, but at the moment, yes, they don't seem to be thriving as a genre.
I'm going to avoid talking more about 1994 in terms of story and the characters and all of that stuff because we will get to more of the ongoing Fear Street trilogy. I hope we do get to talk about at least, all 3 of these films at once, but I'll just say I really enjoyed this. It's a bit long. It's 107 minutes, which is pretty long for a kind of slasher type movie, but it's not. I did kind of say it's. Say again?
I was going to say same length as the next film you're going to discuss, though I won't spoil it.
Oh, there you go, I suppose. And that movie feels so much longer. But no, I would say the 1994, I said it's kind of like a slasher movie, but it has Goonies tendencies. And I think that's why the length doesn't bother me as much. And they also, it's a different kind of slasher thing. I mean, it's not Friday the 13th. It's not it's a little bit of Nightmare on Elm Street in some ways, but it's not like the kind of slasher where there's nothing going on, like there aren't extra layers to the story, which is what I appreciate. And I think that's why people are responding to it, because there's more to it than just like, let's do a slasher again and make it period specific. It's not that kind of thing.
Well, I was just thinking, there was a big slasher film that came out last year, if you remember.
Will
Freaky.
Slashton?
No.
Freaky. Yeah.
That was a big slasher film. That was, I guess, attempt to bring it back. I thought it was pretty good, but I don't know if it made much of a splash.
Freaky was a good time, and it made it a little splash. It wasn't the biggest thing, but I think it was a drive-in success. Like I remember when I saw that at the drive-in, people showed up, and because it was an easy sell for that kind of movie. But that's all I'll say for Fear Street Part 1 at the moment. I know I've seen some people too, like friend of the show Ryan Oliver trashed this movie, absolutely did not like it, doesn't understand why people love it. I've seen people in the total opposite direction. I'm closer to, I'm like 3.5 star over here. With this one, I'm Mr. B, like straight up B with this movie, but a very enjoyable B. But you were going to say something about Ryan that you can't take back?
Well, no, I think he said he didn't finish it, right? He just started watching it, but then found it.
That's true. Yeah, he did.
So I don't know. I mean, just felt that was worth noting.
Yeah. We obviously we don't want to disparage our friend Ryan, and his cinema choices, but that is Fear Street for now. Let's talk about another movie though before this is like the last thing before we kick things off with the Tomorrow War. But Will Ashton, you were a fan of The Boss Baby, right?
No.
You didn't love that movie?
No, I did not.
I thought you were a fan. I thought you liked it.
I remember thinking it was almost admirably very weird. It was just a total chaotic experience in a way that, like, I don't know. I generally don't know if what I remember from that film actually happened or if that's just like a fever dream of what I thought happened. Because I saw it one of those like Saturday morning screenings and I was probably like half awake or whatever seeing it. And I was just like, did all this stuff really happen in the movie or am I just making this up? But I have not revisited the film since. But I remember thinking that was a weird time at the movies.
Yeah, it's a weird movie. I didn't see it in theaters. The movie came out while you and I were doing the Cinemaholics thing. Like, Cinemaholics was already a thing at this point. And I remember we were, I think on track to review this, but I just didn't see it. I did see it eventually. I saw it, I think, while I was putting together a desk at one point. I got a new desk. And that's like my memory of watching this movie. I don't know why it's connected to that. But I remember watching it in the background, and just being like, oh, yeah, it's a goofy little baby. And like, it's about
Cookies
these brothers. Okay.
Are for closers.
Sure. I mean, that was the line from the trailer that, certainly stuck in my head.
Big line.
This movie is the sequel, The Boss Baby, which last week we both thought the subtitle was Back in Business.
Is that not it?
That. It's not it.
Why did they not make it Back in Business?
Because I remember I was editing the show and I was like, wait, that's not what this movie's called. It's called The Boss Baby Family Business.
Oh, they should have called it Back in Business.
They should have called it Girl Boss Baby, because the Boss Baby in this movie, well, I mean, the first one is the daughter of the little boy from the first movie. And this time he's voiced by Jason Marsden because he's an adult now. So like, whereas the first Boss Baby was about like, he's an only child. And now he has to deal with, a little brother, and his little brother's like a CEO or something. That was the drama. That was the conflict in the first one. It was weird. It was silly, but it was fun in its own way. Kind of just a goofy, like a C+ kind of movie. This movie, I'm not going to lie to you, Will. It's in theaters. They're also putting it on Peacock if you're on the paid tier. That's how I watched it. It's going to be available on there, I think, for like 60 days. And I kind of like this one a little bit better. I'm not going to lie to you. And I don't see your face right now, but I imagine you're just kind of like contorting in disbelief because it's the Boss Baby 2 Back in Business. At least that's what we call it. But it genuinely, like, I thought it was slightly sharper than the first movie. I mean, it's still not great, but the premise of this one is that, the baby and the older brother, they've grown up, like I said, and the drama here is that now the main character, I think his name is Tim Templeton, he has his own kid now. He has two daughters, two wonderful little daughters. One of them's a baby and one of them is 7 years old. And I'm first watching this, I'm like, oh, okay, so like the movie's going to be like the baby is going to be the new Boss Baby, right? And then she's going to be part of Baby Corp, that whole thing. And they're going to, have a whole bunch of drama. He's going to be like, oh, no, not again. But actually, this movie is really more about his connection and his struggle with his daughter, who's 7, the second grade little girl, Tabitha. And that's kind of what this movie is kind of going for. I mean, it's not super effective. Like, I wasn't watching this movie and really being like, man, I hope things work out with this guy. He just wants to be a good dad. His problem is that, he doesn't know how to, like, he's worried that his daughter just doesn't look up to him, doesn't respect or appreciate him. And there's a whole bunch of shenanigans because she loves Uncle Ted, the big boss. She wants to be just like him. But then there's like a whole conspiracy thing where his younger baby daughter, she's trying to stop this dude voiced by Jeff Goldblum from doing something. None of it matters, though. The whole point is that he and Alec Baldwin's character, the Boss Baby, they get transformed into little kids again, but they still have their voices. and they have to go on a little adventure and learn about family, and it's all very rote. But I don't know. I thought it was a pleasant enough time. I kind of watched it to decompress. And I think I don't recommend you choose watching this over anything. You could be watching Werewolves Within. You could be watching Fear Street Part 1, 1994. I would much sooner go to some of those other films than I would go to the Boss Baby Family Business. But I have a feeling you were already queuing Family Business, the Boss Baby, as we speak, because you're gonna watch it for yourself, huh?
Probably not. But if I had an excuse to watch it for the show, I probably would have taken it. But alas, this week was already jam-packed. It didn't need to include the Boss Baby from my end, so I don't know. I might see it if by chance it's also nominated for an Oscar, as the first movie was, somewhat surprisingly. If that's the case this year, which I don't know, I feel like this year's animation slate is going to be a little bit more competitive.
Yeah. Two original Pixar movies. Yeah, Mitchell's versus Machines. I don't know.
Yeah, it's still a weak year, I guess, but nevertheless, we'll see. We also got that Pinocchio movie, and the Henry Selick movie, I think, is also supposed to be coming out. I don't know. But
if God Exists, Crypto Zoo.
Yeah, well, that's going to be coming out in August, I believe, right?
Something like that. So yeah. I'm optimistic. Probably
animated
painfully.
Movie of the year, in my opinion, so far.
Agreed. It's one of my favorites. All right, Will. We talked about babies. We talked about America. And that was just the Forever Purge. So let's talk about something equally action-packed. Let's talk about the Tomorrow War.
Well, they say kids never come by unless they need something.
Dad, I need your help.
I'll get my coat.
30 years in the future. We are fighting a war. Our enemy is not human, and we are losing. We need you to fight.
I will be back. And I love you, Chickpea.
7 days from now, when you're sent into that war, you won't be fighting for your country. You'll be fighting for the world.
Is it all right?
Yeah, going to war.
Stop talking. Listen.
Sorry, when I'm nervous, I talk. I'm like a 97 on the nervous scale.
That should be fun.
Welcome to the future. You and your unit are now in 2051.
They're everywhere.
We are food, and they are hungry. Our enemy is smarter, faster, and stronger than you can possibly imagine.
So, The Tomorrow War, it is a sci-fi film directed by Chris McKay. So Chris McKay, Robot Chicken, Lego Batman movie.
Yeah.
What else? Moral Oral. This is his first live-action film that he directed. Yeah, he directed a few seasons of both those shows.
Oh, man. That's a good show, from what I've seen.
Here, I remember watching it back in the day, back a long time ago. It made me laugh, made me cry a little bit.
It's a pretty sad show.
This is the latest Chris Pratt movie. So, okay, at this point, Chris Pratt's been in a lot of things. He's been in Jurassic World sequel. He's been in the Marvel movies as Star-Lord. He's been, what else? That's franchisey. Magnificent Seven.
Yes,
what am I forgetting? Zero Dark 30.
Moneyball, Strangers with Candy, the movie.
Her from Spike Jonze.
Yeah.
Wanted.
He's good in Her. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, no argument there. He was also in Passengers. So Passengers was like the last kind of sci-fi film he was in that wasn't based on existing IP. And,
Onward, kind of fish. That's more fantasy, I guess.
I was thinking more sci-fi. But
Sure.
yeah, he did voice a character in Onward, and Onward, a film that I really liked. But this movie, he's executive producing. I don't know how often he's executive produced as an actor before, but he stars in this one, which is, it's about 2.5 hours. It's kind of an original movie in the sense that like it's not based. Yeah, it's like it's not based on like existing characters, but I think the AV Club said it best, where they're like, this is like a battle royale between a whole bunch of other films, and I think that's really apt. But he stars in this movie alongside a really promising cast. I'm going to start with the people I like the most in this movie: Sam Richardson, J.K. Simmons, Yvonne Strahovski, whom I don't think you and I have ever talked about Yvonne Strahovski before, because she's usually more in TV properties, right? Chuck, big Chuck fan over here. I binged Chuck many, many times.
She was on, wasn't she on the last season of Dexter?
She was on Dexter, which I never got into Dexter, but I know she was part of that. And then also Handmaid's Tale is like one of the recent prestige things.
Okay.
She's been in some movie. She was in that one with, what's his name? Adam Brody, years and years ago.
Adam Brody.
So she's done
marquee name.
She's done plenty of film work.
Actually, a lot of people like Adam Brody. I shouldn't be harsh on him. He was Kid Detective.
I think it might have been Adrian Brody.
Oh.
I think I got my Brodies mixed up.
Oh, well.
What are you going to do?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, she hasn't been in a ton of like movies. I think maybe she was in The Predator, actually, if I'm not mistaken.
The Predator, yes, or Predators?
The Predator, the 2018 one. I think we might have talked about that movie, but I don't remember if we talked about her. Yeah. But she's really great. She's a great actress. I've always thought she's really strong.
Mm-hmm.
I've always thought she should be in more things. And here she is in the Tomorrow War. But also there are a couple of people in here, like Betty Gilpin, who I'm just like, how do you cast Betty Gilpin? And she's not one of the main characters. Because at this point, she's on an ascent, right? Am I mistaken about that? Betty Gilpin should be in like on the poster. But like they kind of give her a role in here that's kind of thankless. I mean, we haven't set up the movie yet, but I just wanted to get that out there. I've been bottling it up.
I mean, pre-pandemic, she seemed to be on the rise. Like she had The Hunt.
She had
was
The Hunt
on
coming out. Glow. She was still fresh off of Glow. I mean, people were like, glow up.
Sure. I'm not even going to acknowledge that. Yeah, but I don't know. I don't know what happened. I know Glow got canceled and The Hunt didn't do that well, but she seemed...
It's a shame. I'm a Betty Gilpin fan.
Yeah. She was also in that movie you love, Coffee and Kareem, that everyone saw last year.
I purged that movie from my system.
Sure.
She was in Stuber. There you go. Stuber was okay. That was like a C+, wasn't it?
Yeah, I don't know. It's another who cares movie.
I think she was also in that Grudge movie, but we didn't. I definitely didn't see that. But
I did see that. Yeah, she was in that. That was a weird film. I don't know what to think about that film, but she is in it. That is undeniably true.
I just wanted to bring it up because we're probably not going to talk about Betty Gilpin for the rest of this review. So
her character is a character who is a wife. She's definitely a wife. Oh, and a mother. She's concerned.
She was a mother in Glow.
Is she? I don't know. I haven't watched Glow.
She was. Yeah.
All right.
You still haven't seen Glow?
No. I'll probably never watch Glow, but I'm sure it's a great show.
It's really solid. But I do want to say, much respect to Betty, but really this is the Chris Pratt movie, kind of to the expense of the other characters. I mean, J.K. Simmons, he's not in it a ton. Like he kind of bookends the movie. But
there is a prominent doughboy in this, Mike Mitchell. If you are a fan of that podcast, Mike
Mitchell's in this. Yeah.
He's a fellow podcaster.
That show, Love, the Netflix show.
Oh yeah, he was good on Love. I like that show.
Yeah, he had a surprising turn in that show. We also have Mary Lynn Razcub, who's in this. I love it when she pops up, and I think she was in Always Sunny, if I'm not mistaken. I know you're a bigger fan of that one, but
yeah.
So the Tomorrow War, the plot. Let's actually talk about it. I've been getting around it because I'm not that interested in the plot of this movie. It's not the thing that interests me, but.
How can you not love the plot of the Tomorrow War?
Because that's the thing. Is like I enjoyed watching this movie, but the more I talk and think about it, the less I like it. And I'm like, I don't want to dislike it more. I don't want to hate it. So I'm trying to. It's weird. I'm avoiding the conversation, but here we go. So the setup is it's like the near future, December 2022. It's like super near future. The main character is a guy named Dan, played by Chris Pratt. He was, and I don't remember if they said this outright, but he was like a Green Beret at some point. He's ex-military.
Yeah.
But now he's a science teacher.
Yeah. And he's like, wasn't he like trying to get back in the military or something, like doing something for the military at the beginning of the film?
Yeah, he was trying to get a job at like a research center that I think was like maybe government owned or something. They didn't really explain it much, but I get
who cares.
Yeah, no one. But yeah, while he's hanging out with his family, his daughter, his wife, and I have to admit though, when I was watching these scenes, I got a stepdad vibe from him. I was like, that's not his kid, and I was wrong about that. Did you think that too? I didn't know if that was just me.
I don't know, because like the weird thing about Chris Pratt in this movie is that he feels like he's committing both 40% and 100% in every scene. Like he's either very earnestly involved or he's like weirdly detached, and it's a very odd vibe
like
that he gives throughout the film.
That's
what I mean.
Yeah. I just don't. We say this as people who don't have stepdads.
Yeah. But I mean, it feels like a very conscious performance, but it also feels like an emotionally searching one as well. And it just kind of creates an odd performance from him, I have to admit.
It is odd. I think what's odd to me the most, because I don't hate the performance. I mean, it's fine for what it is, because I don't think the script is asking that much from him. But what confuses me a little bit about the movie in general is it's Chris Pratt, and it's like he's trying to be three different things that don't go together, or they can go together, but in this movie they don't, which is like suburban dad, kind of everyman, but also ex-military, but also science bro.
Yes,
and it's like,
yeah,
I know people are a multitude, people are complex, they have different dimensions, but this movie really tries to make a different case.
Well, that's the thing, right? Is that like we've seen him play in Every Man, like a good-hearted schlub kind of guy. We know he's capable of that in the right project. Action hero-wise, I think Guardians of the Galaxy makes at least somewhat of a case. Maybe not so much the Jurassic World movies, or even
schlubby rogue. He does it super well.
Yeah, but this, like you said, it's kind of going for more of like a. I don't know what he's trying to like per se do here. I guess kind of like a noble lug in the vein of like a John Wayne-ish, kinda. Maybe like a Patrick Swayze.
I was going to say Clint Eastwood, maybe.
Kinda. Well, that's the thing, right? Is that this performance, I think he's trying to move away from like the jokey buddy thing. Like I think he wants to evolve as an actor, which is fine. That's what actors try to do. But I feel like the role itself doesn't really end up playing to his strengths, because I don't want to say he's like an unadaptable actor. I think he has his limits, but I think he can do certain things pretty well. But the role itself often seems like it's trying to push away from the stuff that we, or at least, you know, some people like from Chris Pratt. I know he has very vocal critics, but I think he can do a certain type of role very well. And this type of role was not that role.
Yeah, there's a bit of a Pratt-lash these days. People kind of being like, he's the worst Chris, you know, he's never been all that great. And I don't subscribe to that kind of thing. I get, like, I know people legitimately just don't like him, and I think that's valid for the same reason any, you know, dislike many actors valid. Yeah.
I mean, there's some things in his personal life that seem a little questionable, but as an actor, I think he can do some things very well. For instance, Parks and Rec. We mentioned Guardians of the Galaxy. I generally think he's quite good in the second Guardians of the Galaxy.
Agreed. Very strong performance there. And yeah, I mean, personal stuff aside, I get the sense that he's just a decent person. Like, you know, like I don't get the sense that he's a big a-hole. I guess my theory with him is that, like, I think he's looking at Harrison Ford's career, and I think to what you're saying, he kind of came up as like a certain Han Solo type, and now he's trying to be, you know, because that's what Ford had to do. And once he got past the Indiana Jones stuff, he was like, okay, I got to do my Fugitive. I've got to get into a different, you know, I got to do, what was it? Regarding Henry, was that the one?
But that's not even a great Harrison Ford performance, Regarding Henry, but that's neither here nor there.
I think though he was trying different things. Now with Pratt, what I think it's different in a way for him. I think he wants this to be his Indiana Jones kind of thing, where it's like sparking a franchise, and he's kind of, was
Jurassic World, I thought, was his Indiana Jones.
You could liken it. I was just thinking more of like doing kind of an original thing that could spark a franchise, because that's the thing he hasn't done yet. He hasn't been in an original thing that has a sequel all on its own, because Guardians is based on comics. It's part of the Marvel machine. Jurassic World. You know what I'm saying? He needs to like prove that he's a bankable actor beyond the IP he's attached to. So I think that's what he's trying to go for, because that's why I think he's going to also pivot then into like the more serious Harrison Ford kind of roles. But I think that this movie, I don't know how it's going to go for him after this movie. Now we've been filibustering because, again, I'm trying to avoid the plot, but I'm sorry. Any last words on Chris Pratt before we actually tell people what the movie's about?
I have a theory for why he did the film, and it's going to be pretty assuming, but I can talk about that more after we discuss the plot.
I'll say my theory real fast. One word. Cha-ching.
Yes.
That's one word, right?
I think, but my theory is that I think this was intended on paper to be a pretty personal project for Chris Pratt, but I can't say with any certainty because I don't know the guy. But I get if it's trying to be this one thing, I think it's supposed to be a pretty meaningful project for him, but I don't think the movie really succeeds at being that thing, but I don't want to jump ahead.
I imagine he saw that Chris McKay was directing and was like, well, I'm named Chris.
Well, that's the thing too, right? Is that like he's very, I think, vocal performance wise, like, I mean, Lego Movie, I think, is one of his best performances.
Well, look, Legos, the Lego comparison, I was going to bring that up. Obviously, he was part of the Lego Movie. Chris McKay came on for Lego Batman. Lego Batman was a big success. It was one of the first movies you and I ever talked about on Cinemaholics, so trivia. But with Chris Pratt, I genuinely think my judgment of him, people seem to love working with the guy. They really do. I mean, people who actually like know him in real life, and like, aside from Anna Faris, I guess, people just love him. I mean, they like working with him. He seems like an affable human being, and so I don't wish anything negative toward him whatsoever. But I do hope that if this is his career, moving forward, that he's able to kind of bounce back, if that makes sense. But yeah, let's talk about this movie. The Tomorrow War, like I was saying before, he's like a dad, a teacher, whatever. He's hanging out with his family, and these alien fighting people show up. I almost said the aliens show up. They don't. These soldiers from the future. I tried to save it, but no. These soldiers from the future, they're kind of dressed up like the Starship Troopers a little bit, very ominous.
Yeah. I was going to say, I've heard someone describe the film as Starship Troopers for Dummies, which you can argue, I guess, if that's fair or not. I actually haven't seen Starship Troopers, so I can't
I said
compare.
that in my review. I said that it's like if you took Starship Troopers, but you didn't have the irony of it, right? Because Starship Troopers, I know you haven't seen it, but it's a very thinly veiled comment on like the American military industrial complex, right?
Yeah.
Tomorrow War just doesn't have that like layer to it, so it's just kind of like a raw onion there.
That's what I find weird is that like Chris McKay, you would think, because his other work is fairly ironic or has that kind of like tongue-in-cheek style, that he would bring that to this project. But I mean, it feels like, I don't know what happened.
In this movie, it's pretty like straightforward. It's very if it has politics, they're probably more libertarian-ish, because it's very much like, we can't trust the military to do anything. We got to do this ourselves. And the concept of it kind of leans into that too, because the idea is that in the future, these aliens show up 30 years from now, and they're wreaking havoc. Humanity's on the brink of extinction, and they don't have enough soldiers. So they have to go back in time to take people who presumably, they kind of mention like maybe these people are going to be dead anyway, so like in the near future, so they pick people for like a certain reason. None of it's explained super well, but the idea is that like people from the past get drafted and only about 30% of them return. And so this starts going on. Chris Pratt has to join the battle, but of course, like, he's ex-military, right? Which I don't even think they make much of a point of that until like right before the action starts, which I thought was kind of humorous. Like, oh, okay, so he has experience doing this sort of thing. Because before you're kind of like, oh, he's screwed. I mean, he's a teacher. How's this movie going to explain him being a Chris Pratt action hero when, you know, he's on this tour or whatever it's called? Now, the action itself, it lasts, like the whole idea is that they're only going to be there for 7 days and then they're going to get like zapped back in time. Apparently, it's like a wormhole. This movie's very confusing, Will, and I don't want to say too much beyond all of that, but what did you think of the Tomorrow War?
As a movie or the war itself?
Either or.
I mean, the war in the movie seems pretty intense. I would not want to participate in the Tomorrow War, though, I don't know, maybe my opinion would be different if I was living in the film. As for the film itself, it's a big old shrug. I can definitely see why they sold it to Amazon, because it seems to fit their modus operandi of doing fairly action-oriented dad-type movies that aren't super style-driven, but they have a sort of consistent tone and pace to them, I guess. I mean, I thought the
John Krasinski, right, with the
Jack
Clancy
Ryan
stuff. The
Jack Ryan model. Which, I mean, we saw also with Without Remorse. They picked that up as well, and it seemed to fit in their template, I guess. That one, I think, was maybe a little bit better than this, but that's really splitting hairs, at least in my opinion. But, yeah, I mean, I feel like my biggest question, and I alluded to this already throughout, which is just, like, what was Chris McKay trying to do? Because I have a theory for why Chris Pratt picked the project, but I just don't really see what Chris McKay was really trying to do, other than like he just saw it as a way to get into live action, kind of similar to Brad Bird with Mission Impossible 4. If it was just like, this is the project that fell into his lap, and it's like, I have a way I can do this, and it'll get me into live action, expand my resume, if that was it. I mean, it's not incompetent. Like, I think the action's handled decently enough, but I find that to be more frustrating because it just makes the movie seem more adequate. Like, it follows, as we were mentioning, a very rote pacing and style, and even like the science stuff doesn't really seem to give a lot of it doesn't have a lot of thought put into the structure and style of it. But there is an emotional intensity to the film, some of it kind of verging onto melodrama in certain segments, but there is, I think, an attempt to do something that's searching and meaningful, but I just don't think the movie itself moves well beyond the rigid format that's pursuing to really do anything or say anything that meaningful or that emotionally investing. So just by the end, I just felt like, well, even throughout watching, I just kind of felt like, yeah, whatever, this is fine. Some of it's kind of cool. The monster design's decent. I think some people are latching onto that because it's something that they can praise, but I didn't think it was like amazing monster design. I thought it was just kind of fine as well. But
yeah, it's like slightly better than usual, because usually it's like really bland and generic. This was like, yeah, you know, it's like if, you know, oh, I got a, you know, ribeye steak instead of sirloin. You know, I guess that's too good of a comparison, but like,
or if you put some, if you got steak, but they put a little like A24, or no, not A24. What's that sauce?
I mean, I'd put chimichurri on it myself.
Sure,
but
there you go. But
I was gonna say, like, instead of meatloaf, it's, you know, like meatloaf with barbecue sauce. The food metaphor isn't working. Let's move on.
Yeah, we're not. I don't know what we're going for here, but yeah, this is one of the frustrating type of films to review, because it's just like, what you can really like latch onto or talk about here, it's just the sort of like another sort of generic ho-hum action film that, I mean, it's nice to see something that's not based on existing properties, but as you were mentioning, it just kind of feels like a collage
it's
of other...
It's designed to be that someday.
Right, exactly. And it's just like another film that just feels like it's trying to start a franchise. It feels like another movie that's designed to be like a pilot, essentially. And it just, I don't know, I just feel like it's exhausting to watch these movies now. It's just like, you just can't have a self-contained film that has one consistent goal. It's just like, it has to be constantly forward-thinking. I guess fittingly here, because it's Tomorrow War, but at the same time, it just like, I don't know, what's there really to like praise or celebrate here beyond just kind of like a few key things like J.K. Simmons' performance, which, you know, is good. I think he does, the admirable job, but is it better than what we see him do otherwise? Not particularly. So, yeah.
I slightly disagree with you on one point, though, which is that I thought this was basically self-contained. Like, I didn't get the sense that the story wasn't over. I did get the sense that they are designing this so that there could be sequels, but I didn't feel like the ending was cheap about that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, there is a payoff, I suppose. Like, there is some catharsis or some emotional, or I guess at least story-wise, there's some resolution. But yeah,
That's
I don't
all
know
I'm
if
saying.
Yeah.
I mean, they leave the door open though. So I get what you're saying there. I guess my thing with it, because I agree with you, it's not a very interesting movie to think about. It's barely interesting to watch in some places. I did find the action enjoyable. I did latch onto the aliens a bit. I found once the action actually started, I was like, okay, like I can get into this. I mean, it's Chris Pratt, and I really like Sam Richardson in this because I know you kind of mentioned off the cuff earlier. You're like, oh man, like this Sam Richardson performance, I don't know, but
the beginning's
I think we
rough.
could both agree he gets better as the movie goes on.
Yeah, I mean, the beginning of the film, it just feels like they're trying so hard to be like, I mean, it's your classic action movie format where it's just like, we've been giving you exposition for 40 minutes. Here's a character who does jokes. And they kind of are just like, just keep telling jokes. Just tell jokes to make people think the movie is a comedy in some ways. And so, I don't know, it just felt like in the beginning, the performance was very put upon. Like they kept forcing him to like be funny in an unnatural sort of way. But I agree with you that I think in the action scenes, he is a good presence. Like the stairwell scene where he's just like shooting at the monsters and he's like, shit. Like stuff like that, I think is fun. Like I like that Sam Richardson. But at the beginning when they're kind of forcing him to be funny, that felt exhausting.
Okay, so I'm glad you brought that up because, like, okay, it's the guy who did Lego Batman. It's the guy who did Robot Chicken. And, like, you have a premise where it's literally everyday citizens being thrust into an alien war 30 years in the future. How is that not played for comedy? Like, how do you not have more funny, interesting moments with that? Because it's like, it should be funny, but instead, they just sort of make it sad and tragic, and he's trying to go for... It takes itself so seriously, which doesn't make sense because you literally start off where like there's a glitch or something, and then we just see dozens of bodies flying in the air and hurling against concrete, and like it's the kind of thing where you should be like, well, you should be. I mean, it's dark, but like you should be sort of reveling in the like, okay, it's this kind of movie, all right. But instead, you're just sort of like, oh God, what? Like it's weird.
No, I was just gonna say like that scene's like the one that stands out to me because it's like the one where I have like an emotional reaction to it, which, like you said, it's like it's funny. It's funny, but it's also kind of disturbing and like horrifying, and it's just like, oh man, like this is like, and it's like more violent than you expect for a PG-13 movie, and it's just like if it can keep this tone throughout in the future scenes, like maybe we got something cooking here. But then, yeah, like you said, it kind of abandons that tone for the rest of the film. So it just feels like that moment, if it could have been that throughout, it would have been maybe something interesting or emotionally compelling, but it didn't really keep that thorough line.
So, and we've been going long enough, but I think that ties into like my main point, and I'm going to leave it at this. It's not that I have an issue with movies that are I don't have any issue with franchise movies, and I don't have an issue with movies that sort of try to like build new IP. I'm fine with that. I enjoy these sorts of things. I'm here for the big, cheesy action franchise type of movie. What bothers me is that I just think that this is a studio-run kind of movie. I think that this is the kind of thing where they found a script. The script here is by Zach Dean. So a few producers saw, okay, like, and I think David Goyer is one of the producers. I think they saw the script and were like, this could be it. Like, we get Chris Pratt in this. We get a couple people in here. And it just felt like they were putting the machine together before they ever had somebody sit down and really, like, envision this. And I think they brought in Chris McKay because I think that he was available and he was looking for his shot. And I do think they tried a few things in this, but we didn't even get to the fact that this is kind of like 3 different movies kind of put together. It's almost like if you were watching a mini series, because it keeps changing over and over again, and it goes to unexpected places. And I think that's something that some people are liking. They're like, oh, cool. But then other people are like, this movie's too long. Like the pacing of this thing is messed up.
Yeah.
It's totally off kilter. And I'm closer to that brigade, but at the same time, I'm not going to lie, Will, I watched this, sweating because I thought I was, I knew I was missing Forever Purge, but I found myself being like, that was a movie. If I had seen that in a theater, I think I would have liked it okay. But sure. I think watching it at home on Amazon was just kind of strange. And it didn't feel like the right environment for this kind of movie. I should have been watching it with a big group, and I didn't. Yeah. So I think that's like the main reason I felt so let down.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, as I was alluding to before, I think my theory for what Chris Pratt's intention with this film is that I think when he became famous and he became this in-demand actor, his focus became so career-oriented that, like, I think his home life kind of started to dissolve a bit. And I think that's might have been what caused the relationship with Anna Faris to break up. And I feel like there's something here where he can see, like, a way to like balance his career with like his home life in a way that I think resonated with him personally. And I think a few scenes in this showcase that emotional earnestness. And I think if the film were to follow through with that in a way that was investing and emotional, I think that could have made a really impacting film. But I just don't think the performance is able to really expand in that way. Like I said, I think the formula of the film is so tightly compounded to like your traditional blockbuster, and then this happens thing, that I don't think it really allows Chris Pratt to emote in that particular way or search meaningfully in that particular way. And I don't want to take away if he did get something out of this project in a personal sense, but at the same time, like we were saying before, I just feel like the performance itself feels kind of confused because it feels like it's trying to be this traditional unemotional performance detached in some way, but it's also trying to be a little bit more engaged in a sort of subdued sort of way. And I think the scenes with Chris Pratt and the younger daughter, I think there are times where that tends to work and we can kind of see that come through. But at the same time, I just don't think the movie itself really allows itself to be more than the kind of straightforward narrative that we see from these type of overwrought blockbusters time and time again, and that we're just left with a, by design, kind of ho-hum, mediocre action movie that doesn't really allow itself to be more than the sum of its parts. So I don't know if you can really go beyond that, and so I feel like it's a big old shrug of a C. There's stuff to like in here. I think the supporting performances are generally pretty good, but at the same time, I just feel like it's a missed opportunity for most everyone involved.
I'm a low C+. I'm gonna give this one a little bit of a bump, just because I do think that like it could have been much worse, and so I do want to kind of appreciate some of the things in here that I do think work enough, and I don't think it's like a total miss. I just think that I'm a little perplexed by how this movie sort of came about, the story behind it, and how this went from Paramount to Amazon. And there's a lot of drama in surrounding this movie and surrounding how streaming and theaters just aren't playing nice together at the moment. And it's funny you mentioned, because I wonder if like in terms of Chris Pratt's like personal connection to this movie, I wonder if that's maybe what I was picking up on subconsciously, because I wasn't even thinking about, the fact that he's going through that in his life, and like that affects the projects that you pick, that's the only reason we're bringing it up. It's like when you look at an actor's arc and you look at their career and their personal lives, like, they're usually narratives that you can look at and you can extrapolate from like why certain actors choose certain things. And for him, he's going through some interesting developments right now. And I think that, I totally imagine him reading the script and seeing a lot of opportunity. I saw opportunity in this movie as well. I just don't think it lived up in execution. And, not the worst thing to happen. It could have been much worse. And I'm sure plenty of other people will find it reasonably enjoyable. One of our writers at The Young Folks liked it more than we did, for sure. He gave it a 7 out of 10 and definitely had some nice things to say about it. And I know some people are digging this one okay. But that is The Tomorrow War. Do you have anything else you wanted to add before we go back forward in time to the next thing?
Not really, no. I mean, I have noticed some critics are more favorable on this. I think the critic at the playlist also gave it like a B+ or something. So some people are really responding to this thing in a way that, I don't know, I guess I wish I had that investment in it. And there's stuff to like. Like I said, I do think, Sam Richardson livens it up. J.K. Simmons is good. And I think his dynamic with Chris Pratt does get a little bit better as it goes along as well. But yeah, I feel like the stuff that works here becomes more disappointing because the movie itself doesn't really gel into something that feels really enriched or fully realized. So by extension, the stuff I like almost kind of makes the movie worse in my view, because it's like, oh, I can kind of see the better film popping out, and it just becomes, like another mushy blockbuster that doesn't really do much of anything by the end.
That is The Tomorrow War. It is 138 minutes long. You can catch it right now on Amazon Prime Video. All right, our next film. I don't think we'll talk about this one as long, but we, definitely plenty to say about this movie, Zola. So Zola is a dark comedy, and I believe it's the first film ever to be based on a Twitter thread. And this particular Twitter thread went viral several years ago. I forget what year was exactly. It was like 2016, 2015. Yeah.
I think it's 2015.
And
yeah.
Yeah, the Twitter thread itself, you can go read it now. It's by Asia Zola King, Zola being like her nickname, or I forget how she refers to that name for herself.
Well,
but
one correction. I believe the Twitter thread is deleted, but you can see screenshots of it pretty easily online.
Yeah, it's accessible. You can find it for sure. And in this movie, they reference the thread throughout. Like at certain points in this movie, when there is a line of dialogue, I think straight from the Twitter thread, you hear like the tweet sound. Beep beep, not beep beep, but it's like the whistle, whatever it is.
Yeah, the little whistle.
Better than I was doing. But the reason this thread went viral was because Zola, she went on this kind of unpredictable, chaotic, I don't want to call it an adventure, but it's a story, all right? And it's something that is pretty harrowing, and reading it on Twitter, you're just like, holy cow, like how did somebody actually went through this, to the point where you wonder, like, did this actually happen, And this is, according to the people involved, a real story, and it's about a woman who kind of gets roped into some unpredictable shenanigans down in Florida, which turns into, I believe, I don't know how much I want to give away here necessarily, but I'll just say this: so things happen, and the person playing Zola in this movie is Taylor Page. We saw Taylor Page pretty recently in Boogie and Ma Rainey's Black Bottom.
Yeah,
a few other things.
Who else? Yeah. She was also with Coleman Domingo in that film.
In that movie, Coleman Domingo also in this film. But the other main character here, who plays Zola's kind of new friend, is Riley Keough, plays Stephanie. And Riley Keough we've seen in all kinds of things. One of my favorite actors working today, especially like one of the more underappreciated in some ways. Like, I know people like her, but like sometimes I just don't think I think people still underestimate her. I'll put it that way, especially with a movie like The Devil All the Time and Under the Silver Lake. I mean, she always brings it. Even in It Comes at Night, a movie that I certainly wasn't the biggest fan of, I think that she's a shining star in that.
Yeah, I mean, I think she is an indie darling, and I also really like her performance in American Honey, which this movie reminded me of quite a bit.
Yeah, Sasha Lane. You can also catch her on Loki right now, which, Will, I think that's your favorite show you've been telling people?
I have not watched a single episode of it. I think I actually did see a trailer for it, though, but otherwise have seen none of it.
Loki, it's the only Marvel show that is actually getting better as it goes. I'll put it that way. But so aside from Riley Keough, we already mentioned Coleman Domingo, also in this movie, Nicholas Braun. and Ariel Stachel. So this movie premiered at Sundance in 2020. So it's been a long time since I saw it, about a year and a half, but I remember it pretty vividly. And I did have the good fortune to be able to see it on the big screen. A lot of people can see it on the big screen now in the US, thanks to the vaccines and all of that. It's now being released by A24. And when I initially saw the movie, I liked it. I was like a B- on it. I wasn't the biggest fan. And this was one of the buzziest titles. People were really looking forward to this. And I remember responding to it in a way where I think my biggest criticism with it, and I maintain, is that I just don't think it ends very strong. It has so much confidence throughout. It feels like all of the style, all of the substance. This is directed by Genisa Bravo, and you just really tell she's assured in this movie that she wants to make this movie. Everybody wants to be here. Everybody's interested. Like, people telling the story are interested in this story. And you can tell, that Bravo herself, like, she knows how to make really good short films. She knows how to take premise, like a premise that feels kind of like short and sweet, and kind of expand it a bit. And I kind of just, throughout this movie, I found myself just not quite feeling the screenplay, like feeling like the end result of it really being worth it at the very end. I just felt like it was missing something, and some kind of secret ingredient. Now, that said, I've only seen the film once, and it was a while back. But Will Ashton, you saw this pretty recently. What did you think of Zola?
I think I ultimately liked it a little more than you did, but I did find myself in a similar position where I was really digging the vibe of it and what it was doing in terms of perception and what it was saying about like cultural appropriation and about the general hassles of sex worker life, and while also being, very flashy, but not in a like overly like, I guess almost an aggressive fashion. Maybe some people will feel that way, but I feel like the movie, it is visually very striking. One thing I really love about the film is that it has the crisp 60 millimeter film, so it has that, like, you can kind of feel like the grime of everything. You can kind of, like, when you go into like a scuzzy hotel, you can kind of feel like the murkiness in your mouth a little bit. And it's just like, I love when movies use film in that way, and they use film as a medium to like kind of get you into the perception of the characters and make you feel like you're living in them.
I remember thinking of Florida Project a lot during this.
Sure. I mean, I don't think I would agree in terms of like the stories, but I think like
no, but like the setting, like 'cause
feel.
it's another Florida movie. It's kind of has the sex work thing too, but I think like kind of just, yeah.
Yeah, I get what you mean. I guess I think I was thinking more of like American Honey mixed with like maybe Spring Breakers or something. I guess those are the two movies that came to mind for me, probably because they're both A24 films, and this is very much an A24 film, even though I believe they didn't produce it, though certainly obviously they acquired it from Sundance. But
yeah, I believe that's the case. Yeah, they distributed it from Killer Films.
But like you're essentially like I think it's very confident and knows what it wants to do from a visual perspective, and I think the story moves along in a very zippy, fashionable way. And I love the performances for the most part. I think, as you're mentioning, Taylor Page and Riley, is it Kino? I never quite know how to pronounce her last name.
I always check every time I see her in something new, and I always forget, so I apologize. I just say Keo, but I don't think that's correct.
I don't know. Honestly, yeah.
It could be Ko, it could, Riley K.
Yeah, I mean, I think I really love like the yin and yang of their performances. Like obviously Riley is kind of playing it up in a way that, it feels very exact, and it's also obviously heightened, but it doesn't feel like overly heightened to the point where it's like out of the realm of plausibility. Like I think if you've seen some people in your life like this, you'll kind of like have like maybe like a sweat of like
I know this person.
Yeah, like, oh geez. But like, from the opposite perspective, like Taylor Page is like, she can like shoot someone down with just like a steely gaze in a way that I think is really effective here. I've heard some people say it like she's maybe a little bit too passive as a protagonist for the film, which
she's the strong silent type.
Right, that's why I kind of took that approach from it, and I can see why people feel that way, but I think by and large I think she does have agency, and I think she I think the story belongs to her, and it doesn't feel like the extremism of the supporting characters overtakes from her perspective or what she wants to get out of this whole ordeal. And likewise, like, as we were mentioning, Coleman Domingo, I think, is fantastic. Just like a full, like, thunderous force in this movie in a way that I think is, like, obviously charming and then unsettling, sometimes, like, going right back to back in one scene. And then Nicholas Braun, I don't think he's doing anything we haven't seen before, but I just think his, like, puppy dog energy throughout is very charming and funny. Like, there's one
still
scene.
well cast.
Yeah. Like, there's one scene where, like, he's, like, in the hotel room. He doesn't know what's happening. Like, you can, like, see him out the window. And he looks like a little puppy dog that's just, like, watching his owners leave the house. And he's just, like, you can almost basically hear him, like, whimpering, just being like, "Oh, like, what?" It's just, like you said, perfectly cast in that role. And I guess that's why, similar to you, like, I think I was hoping it was going to build up something very grand or, like, have, like, that kind of, like, final punch. And then when we got to the ending, it's just like, well, that's how things go sometimes. All right, tip your waitress.
Yeah.
Goodbye, everybody.
It's like missing, not a third act, but it's like missing a final scene almost. I don't know.
I guess I just feel like maybe it just need to, like, say something more at the end to really kind of, like, have that wallop. And I don't know. I didn't read the thread before I saw the film. I started reading it afterwards. So, I mean, it does kind of just feel like it's left dangling and at the way it's just like, I feel like there was some resolution there that needed to be shown, even if it was fabricated, to give this, like, some sort of, like, catharsis or something, like something that would, like, really give this film some kind of, like, sense of completionism or something. But as it is, it just kind of leaves you dangling in a way. It's just like, oh, okay. Like, it's not like I'm unsatisfied. I was entertained throughout, and I think what it's doing and what it's saying is often on point. I just found myself kind of wondering, is this like, well, if it ends here, like, what's the greater point ultimately? Like, what are we trying to say on the whole, outside of just, like, the general kind of commentary that's sprinkled throughout the film? And in the end, I just found myself kind of wanting in that regard. But I guess that's why I find myself frustrated. So, like, I think the stuff around the film is generally good to very good, that it just kind of feels like if it had nailed that ending, it would have been an all-around just really tremendous film.
I think there is something here to, like, you're making a movie about a Twitter thread. So lean in on that. And I think that instead of leaning in on what that means for a story like this to be translated into this medium, instead I think the movie just kind of falls on some cheap gimmicks. There are at least things that feel like gimmicks to me, like the notification sounds and just some of the, like, different things they try to add in. Like, at some point we get a different POV, and a lot of it felt like they're trying hard to justify this, of like, we no, this is a real movie, trust us. Like, yeah, it's based on a Twitter thread, but, you know, it just, that part of it doesn't have confidence. But what works about the movie is that Taylor Page and Riley Keough, Coleman Domingo, I mean, they are bringing it. And I think that their characters are really complex and they're very interesting. There's a lot going on, I think, between Page and Keough's characters. The dynamic between them, I think, is pretty fascinating. It's just, it's like you say, it's trying too hard in all the wrong ways. I think that another thing, if I can reference yet another movie, I would honestly look at something like Ingrid Goes West. Now, there's a movie that it's not based on, like, an Instagram thing, but it's based on Instagram, and it takes, like, what Instagram means today to certain people, and it embellishes, it exaggerates it, but it does it in a dark, pointed way, and in a way that makes it very memorable, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think that film is also better at communicating just the general artifice of being online in a way that it does have its, like, foot in some reality, but it's also, like, aware of just, like, the general sort of emptiness of online life in a way that I find really affecting and haunting. And I think the movie this movie, Zola, I think it communicates that at times, but I also think it's also trying to be fairly rooted in some reality that it doesn't really lean into that as much. And I know a lot of people disagree, and that's fine, but I found myself kind of feeling like it didn't have that balance quite as effectively.
That's what I'm feeling too. I'm feeling like it's telling a story that people will definitely recognize about, you know, the way that, you know, different cultures are appropriated, right? And how the Zola character, she has to say and act and behave a certain way for her own preservation, because she's forced to see, you know, kind of put up with Stephanie's antics because she knows the power dynamic in certain scenes. And it's sort of about, like, why we do the things that we do and how these things get pushed. But I just think that, like, again, if the whole point of the Twitter thread, the reason it went viral, it wasn't because of the story itself. It was the way that she told it. And so if you're going to bring that to film, I think you have to preserve what is so like the energy of a thread and what a thread means. And instead, I think they just sort of made like a formulaic retelling, and then they realized it was kind of formulaic, and then threw in, like I said before, like all the gimmicks to sort of like justify what they were doing. And so that's why I've been a little bit harder on this film than most. I think I was like pretty low on it coming out of Sundance. As time went on, I my opinion for it improved somewhat. I thought like, okay, like maybe I'm not giving enough credit for, some of the things it does actually do in some deft ways. And I think the style of this pushes it really far, and the performances do too. So I'm still pretty favorable on it. I'm like kind of between a B- and a B. I keep wavering though. I think I'll probably end up in B territory, but while I sit over here and tweet my feelings, you can go ahead and give your final grade, I guess.
Yeah, I'm similar to you, I guess, in that I when it ended, I was 100% sure where I landed on, and I was ultimately positive, but I did kind of feel myself left wanting like something at the end there to really make it feel like I got the full experience out of it. By the end, I just kind of felt like, okay, so like what was a greater thing that feels absent here? And as I read reviews, I read different perspectives on the film, I generally do I find myself more appreciative of the film because I find myself admiring more what it's able to do at its best moments. And I do think a lot of the like just the technical aspects of it are really strong. I think the sound design is very strong. I think the score from Mika Levy, it's not my favorite from him, but her. Mika Levy, I do really like what she has done elsewhere, and I think, like comparing this to something like Kajillionaire and Minari, I don't think it quite reaches those heights, but I do think overall it does show that's like, yeah, this is like what I want from A24 in general, like strong performances, a clear perspective, some very keenly aware social perspectives as well, but yeah, I don't think it quite sticks the landing in a way that makes me fully appreciate it in a well-rounded sort of way. But as time goes on, I do really think that it is saying something interesting, and I think a lot of people are really going to latch onto this in a way that I can certainly understand. I think it has its fingers on the pulse in a way that I think is going to make it both an interesting time capsule and also a film that might show us a glimpse of like what movies are going to be in the future. So it does give me some hope in some good ways. Though I will say, please don't make any more movies about Twitter threads. I think in general, like this is the exception to the rule, I think. I'm
open-minded, but I get what I know how you're feeling. I get what you're saying. I was just going to mention real fast, Mika Levy, you kind of made it sound like she also did the score. I don't think you meant to do this, but she didn't do the scores for Kajillionaire or Minari. That was Emile Masieri.
Oh, sorry, my bad.
She did the score for Jackie.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, sorry, my bad. Mixing up my composers.
Normally, I wouldn't have caught it, but Emile Masieri is one of my favorites. So when I heard that, I was like...
Sorry, but Mika Levy did Under the Skin, right?
Yeah,
because I love the score for Under the Skin. I think that's one of my favorite scores from the past few years. So I know she's done like a lot of stuff that I really like. So I was mixing her up with one of your favorite composers. So my bad. I apologize for that.
I like to think it's because you were just putting yourself in my shoes for a day. And,
sure.
It was just getting all confusing.
I will push back, though, on one thing you said. I don't really think the film is quite as gimmicky as you're suggesting. I think in some ways it kind of verges onto that, but I think it's also doing some interesting things. For instance, like I think there's a keen point to why we flip perspectives in that one scene. Like it is presented in a comical fashion, but there is something about that I feel is also kind of melancholic in a meaningful sort of way that, I don't know, like stuff like that really stands out to me more as I think about the film. So I don't want to like dismiss the film as like leaning into gimmicks, but I can kind of see what you mean in that like it does kind of like have a flashy approach that can be at times a little grating.
All right, well, that is Zola. It is now available to watch in theaters, and I do think that if you're in the mood for an A24 kind of movie, if you're looking for something that definitely other critics like a lot more But I know plenty of people who really, really love this film, and I can totally understand why. Just I don't think really worked for me in all of the same ways. But I happily, I'm glad I saw it, and it has aged well for me over time.
Oh, did I get my grade?
I think you were getting to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, my bad. I give this a low B.
I thought they were going to give it a Z.
No.
All right. Well, that is Zola. It is just, how long is it? 90 minutes. Hour 30. Very
yeah,
clean.
it's real short. And it moves fast. I'll give it that.
Yeah. All right, next up. Gosh, speaking of movies that critics like, this is looking like it's going to be one of the biggest, like, critical darlings of the year, and that is Summer of Soul, or When the Revolution Cannot Be Televised, as it's known through its subline. This is a music documentary directed by Questlove. It is about the 1969 Harlem Cultural Festival. Both Will and I saw this at Sundance, and it's one of my favorite movies of the year. I believe you enjoyed it as well, Will, because you did see it, right? I'm not misremembering that?
Yeah, no, actually, I think I saw it a little before you did, because you caught it at the end of the festival, if I'm not mistaken.
I think so, yeah.
And I caught it, I think that was like my first film on the second day, so that was like one of the first films I saw, and it was a good way to start the festival, I'll say that.
I'm happy to see that it is now getting a limited theatrical release, so people can actually go see this in theaters. I really want to. It hit limited release on June 25th. It expanded this past weekend. Searchlight, the company that used to be Fox but is now owned by Disney, is currently distributing the film. And if you can't see it in a theater, if it's not playing in your area, you can also watch it on Hulu right now. And like I said, critics are really liking this. And I think the reason people like this is because there's a really good story behind this movie. I think people really like it when they get clued in or reminded of something that's been like forgotten to history. I think a lot of the successful documentaries have been kind of like that. It's like, oh, here's this thing that like people don't talk about enough that they should. It's such an epic thing. And then if a documentary can kind of sort of relitigate an event and then bring it to a cultural consciousness, I think that it rightfully captures the attention of people who people in the industry, people who are critics, people who want, information and pop culture to be more aware of certain things. So that's kind of the setup for Summer of Soul. In terms of what it's capturing, it really is phenomenal because, Will, did you know about this event at all? This cultural festival going into this movie?
No, I went in pretty cold.
Yeah, same here. I had no idea what this was. And, as soon as the movie starts, you get a really good sort of like introduction to this was the Black Woodstock. But like even saying that kind of feels like reductive, it's like it was its own thing. It was something that was this epic music festival back in the days when you could watch a music festival for free. It took place in Mount Morris Park, which is located in Harlem. It's now called Marcus Garvey Park. So if you are in New York right now, you won't find it. But this festival went on for 6 whole weeks. It had a huge, huge attendance. Lots of people came out to see this, and you see it in the archived footage. But some of the acts include Stevie Wonder, Mahalia Jackson, Nina Simone, who gets like an entire section of this documentary. But then we also have the Fifth Dimension. Say again?
I said as well she should.
Of course. I mean, Questlove knows how to pace this documentary. I'll put it that way. The Fifth Dimension is all the staple singers, Sly and the Family Stone, Gladys Knight and the Pips. I mean, watching this movie, you don't have to be a music junkie to really get the full experience out of this movie. But I think like if you are like obsessed with this era, there's a lot to feast on with this. But also, like, what happens around this festival is that it was very obscure. It was the kind of thing that people that kind of got erased, as a lot of like Black milestones and like Black American milestones tend to happen, And this is 1969. This is the summer of the moon landing, right? And all of these other things like that and Woodstock were kind of just like, being what was propped up at the time, where this was just sort of happening out in obscurity, like I said. But I think that it is wonderful that this footage is finally being released. It was, I think, like a documentary crew was filming it, but then they had all of this footage of the festival and it just sat in a closet for decades. Somehow Questlove got a hold of it and was able to turn it into a movie, a long but really satisfying film. One of my favorite documentaries in recent years, and I think definitely my favorite documentary of 2021. But Will, what did you think of Summer of Soul? I mean, we both saw this a while back, but yeah, has it aged well for you after all this time?
I would say so. Yeah. I mean, I haven't seen it since, but I mean, just thinking back on it, the thing that always sticks with me is just like how warm and celebratory it is just by design. I mean, obviously Questlove got lucky with having, this tremendous footage that he found, but I do think generally throughout the film, he does showcase, especially as a first-time filmmaker, some adeptness that I think proves that it's not just like he, hit the jackpot. Not that, I mean, obviously he did get lucky, but I mean, there's one scene in particular I remember watching and just being like, okay, like this is like proof that he knows what he's doing. And that's the scene where we get kind of like the broader culture reaction where, like the moon landing's happening, but we then cut back to like the festival and we kind of get like this broad scope of like, this is what's happening. It feels like a better version of like what they're trying to do in that one scene in First Man, where like it was kind of trying to touch on something similar, but like Questlove, I think, gets it down in a way that just like really, I think, crescendos a film in a way it's like, okay, like this is like, it puts you in this place and time in a way that doesn't take you out of it, doesn't like feel like it's like invading the concert footage and stuff. It's not like just like, and then this is what's going on, back to music. Like it flows together in a way that I think is really impressive and showcases Questlove's adeptness as an early filmmaker. But by and large, it's just like, it's a really fun, emotionally passionate film that is, just filled with all these great performances. And as you're suggesting, it has this like urgency to it where it feels, for a lot of obvious reasons, like it needs to be this work of preservation that needs to be shown and seen, to be heard and finally just realized in this major way, being that it's been forgotten for so long. And initially when I saw the film, I was kind of back and forth on the like talking head segments. Like I felt like they were kind of starting to be like filler at times, but I think he really makes it work towards the end when it realizes that like you see the footage of people like kind of revisiting the film or seeing it for the first time and just like holding on their faces and just seeing that like joy and sadness and that like sense of discovery and nostalgia in a way that just like really it works. And I think that's the stuff that sticks with me, and I think makes it more than just a really impactful concert film. It just like this work that needs to be preserved and celebrated in a major way. So yeah, a good doc all around.
It really is. And I think like it would have been good enough if Questlove had just sort of presented this festival as is, kind of packaged it up and been like, it's fun. It's like, oh, it's this, kind of thing that you haven't really heard about probably, like people like us, I suppose. But instead, I think that he really frames the context so well in this. And I think like, yeah, like you were saying with First Man, it's like, the reason that scene kind of feels out of place is because the rest of the movie isn't about that. So it's kind of like just sort of, that to me felt like filler in First Man, honestly, of like, oh yeah, here's also this. And like, I mean, I know what the point of that scene was, to sort of be like, man, like all of these obstacles, all of this like public anxiety about the situation and people being like, we shouldn't even be doing this, we're wasting the money. Like it does serve a function, but I think because the rest of the movie is like glorifying and lionizing Neil Armstrong, that it's kind of like,
right.
It's a different energy. It's a different tone.
I think in that film it felt more conscious, I guess. Like it's like he just kind of felt like he needed to have that scene in for his like
exactly,
it felt kind of obligatory in a way that in this film it's like it's adding to the thesis. It's clearly like it's a major function of film. It's like what he's trying to get at broadly throughout this film, and I think obviously that's why it works so much better in this context than it did there.
Absolutely. I think that he does so well to like with this context really show like why these people were here, what they were celebrating, and that sort of like Black unity that was on display. And I like how the documentary goes to some tricky places in that respect. Like I think it was like Fifth Dimension, if I'm not mistaken, has that whole section where they felt like maybe they're out of place in this situation. Like maybe they like because their sound isn't like, to other people it doesn't sound Black as they describe it, but to them it's their music. And there was like some nervousness about getting on stage and performing to all of these people who might not accept them. There's like little moments like that that really bring this together. We mentioned, of course, the Nina Simone section, which is just like mesmerizing. It's the kind of spellbinding stuff that I always look for in a really good film. And I can't remember a documentary that sort of had me kind of under a spell like that.
Yeah, no, I liked also this film because it has the power of the footage. It doesn't have to just be like characters always just talking about like why this artist is great. They can just show you real footage of just the artists in their element and doing, you know, for some of these artists, like at their peak, you know, at their like some of their greatest heights as musicians, and you can just like see it and live in it. And obviously, you know, the footage is preserved very well, so it feels very crisp, and it's easy to feel like living in the moment in a way that is obviously very electrifying and powerful in many respects.
But then some of the artists are just starting out, and so you get to see that too. You get to see Stevie Wonder, you know, really at like the very beginning, I think, of his career, if I'm not mistaken. And
yeah,
so
he's like early 20s, I think.
He's very young at that point.
Maybe mid,
And, you know, I've had the privilege of seeing him live, and, you know, it's a very different, you know, thing, obviously, because, you know, with that experience and, you know, the way his music has really matured over the years, it's just a delight to kind of see such a spontaneous performance from him in this sort of, well, more of a spontaneous environment, I should say. I think what sums up this documentary the best, and what really made me fall for it head over heels, was this really great scene where this guy, he was there when he was a little kid, and he's just talking about how he had sort of wondered if this whole thing was like a memory. Like, oh, maybe this didn't even happen. I just dreamed it, you know, because it was such a transportive experience. And like, it made me think of like the memories I've had as a kid, and I thought that maybe those are dreams. But then you get to see his reaction to seeing the footage. I mean, it's like, that is just good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like deliberate, undeliberate form of gaslighting, where it just kind of feels like so many great works of art have just like been swept under the rug, and either like through the media or just like culturally they just don't get recognized as much. And this movie, like I was saying before, just has that urgency of feeling like it needs to be relived, or it needs to be preserved, or it needs to be seen in this fashion to like know that it wasn't just thing that was forgotten or brushed over time, that it is to be recognized and celebrated. And, you know, it's very in some ways simple intent, but I think it's also very impassioned and meaningful, and it succeeds, I think, in many different respects.
I definitely agree. And, you know, you kind of mentioned one of the things that, you know, maybe irked you a little bit, you know, and I don't get the sense that it was necessarily like a deal breaker or anything like that. But, you know, the talking heads and the prevalence of that. There were times when it would cut to people talking, and I'd be like, I kind of just want to see the music, please.
Yeah.
Like there was a bit of that, and it did get a little annoying at times.
Yeah, I mean, just like some stuff towards the beginning just feels a little perfunctory. Also, like just having like kind of just like the like stock black and white footage that, like, you know, it's necessary for establishing it, but doesn't feel like the most inventive or imaginative as far as like presenting this information and what it's trying to say. But, you know, like I said, Questlove's a first-time filmmaker. I certainly forgive him for that, because I think the heights of film are very high, and I think those are the moments that need to be recognized and celebrated. So that's a minor quibble, I think, in the broad scheme of things.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think I saw it on Twitter, but somebody basically said that when Lin-Manuel Miranda showed up, it's like the movie's one jump scare. I thought that was pretty funny.
Oh, yeah. I forgot to mention, I did see the Rita Moreno documentary recently.
You did catch up on that.
Yeah, and he was a producer on it, and he just keeps like popping into that film as well. And just, you know, at one point it was especially egregious because it's talking about like the immigrant experience in like 1910 or like maybe like 1920, and Lin-Manuel Miranda just like, yeah, you know, like when you're living in this time, it's just like, sorry, Lin-Manuel Miranda, but you cannot comment on what it was like to be an immigrant.
I just wish somebody would be like, this is Harlem, Lin. Like, does this look like Washington Heights to you? No?
Right. Well, I mean, you know, I mean, he didn't really grow in Washington Heights.
That's right.
He
grew up north of Washington Heights.
Right.
Oh, man.
It was just one of those moments where it's just like, you don't have to comment on this, Lin-Manuel Miranda. You can just let the movie speak for itself. But yeah,
he's like, I'm just saying. Can I just say this real quick? No, it's all right. Just closing the door kind of slowly. No hate to Lin-Manuel Miranda over here. Just pointing that out. But yeah, I adored this movie, and I want to see it again as soon as possible. I can't wait to see this on the big screen if I get a chance to do so. It's what documentaries should be, I think, in every way. Well produced, well managed. The editing is really, really solid. I think that it takes you to another place. And I think it's going to teach people a lot of things. I think other people, it's going to remind them of something, bring light and truth to something that maybe had been forgotten. And it's going to reveal things to people who may have chosen to forgotten, or, who would have liked to have known a long time ago, which is definitely where I fall. And it's stuff like that I certainly find so warm about this documentary. And I think you use the warm as well, because it's warm. I mean, it's a hot summer movie. I felt the heat watching that movie in January. And I just think this one, it hits all the right notes because it's about music. Right?
I mean, to go one step further, it's
Not
quite
flat?
a crowd pleaser as a documentary.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's a very accessible film. I think it's just, it has very clear intent. It knows what it's trying to say and communicate, but it's also just about having a good time and celebrating the artistry and music and iconography of these many artists, and recognizing them, like I said, either at their heights or soon to be heights. And it's just a damn good time. So I'd give it a pretty warm B+.
You give it a B+. I give it the A-. I think this one's a must see. So I'm going high. One of my favorite films of the year for sure. I think this is definitely in my top 10 right now. So definitely go check it out when you have the chance. It's a long movie, but I think it is very rewarding. And I mean, you can at least see it on Hulu. And I think if you have a great sound system, you are going to be in for a treat. It is 117 minutes long.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's worth mentioning that we saw it at home on our computers through Sundance, and I think it doesn't rob the experience in any fashion to watch it at home. But if you can see it in theaters, I'm sure it's an amazing experience.
Agreed. Okay, our last movie of the week, No Sudden Move. This is the latest film from Steven Soderbergh. I really love I never know when this guy's going to come out with a new movie. I always feel like I'm the last one to know. Other people are like, yeah, John, we knew Soderbergh was making this movie in 2016. And I'm like, really? Okay. Yeah. But no, I mean, this one, I literally 2 weeks ago, I just saw oh, he's making another movie? Okay. Well, the last one was Let Them All Talk, right? Which...
Yes.
Fun movie. I saw it all.
Yeah. I mean, I know you were kind of mixed on it when we talked about it initially, but I did like it. Yeah, I mean, I liked it at the time, and I've grown to like it more in retrospect. I think it's a solid film. I don't think it quite reaches its heights, but I do think he tends to make more good films than bad. His misses are certainly more the exception than the rule. But for me, I tend to follow his career as far as I know when he's making stuff, but I never know when they're coming out until shortly there before. So I was kind of with you in that I knew about this film. I knew that he was making it in 2019 and then end up shooting it in 2020, but I didn't know what the timeline was. And then just they're here you go, it's coming out in early July, and just well, what? I didn't know this was already completed. But knowing Soderbergh, I mean, he turns them around very, very fast.
I do want to say this is his second HBO Max film of 3 that he has arranged. The next one's called Kimmy. I don't know when that's coming out, but I know Zoe Kravitz is in that, so we'll see how that turns out. But Let Them All Talk, that was another HBO Max one. And before that, he's kind of it's every other movie, it feels like. Because, I didn't Let Them All Talk as much as you did. I really like No Sudden Move, so I'm getting ready to talk about that. But then before that, he has Laundromat. I'm but then High Flying Bird. Loved High Flying Bird. Really liked that movie. Then Logan Lucky. Well, Unsane, but then Logan Lucky. I hadn't seen Unsane, but you saw that one.
Yeah, Unsane was pretty good. I liked High Flying Bird. Laundromat was the one of his rare misses for me. It just
that was a rough one.
I think that was just one of those rare times where his grasp exceeded his reach. He didn't quite capture it. There's moments in there I think that are good, but on the whole, I think it's more of a miss than a hit, which is a shame. But I do like Logan Lucky a good bit. I think that's quite a bit of fun.
I do too. Ages well. Another Riley Keough film, of course, but another performance from her that I really like. I'll say with Soderbergh, I always hope that one of his movies is going to be one of the really good ones, you know? Like for me, the really good ones are like Magic Mike and Ocean's 11, you know, the obvious ones, I guess. But every once in a while, he just comes like The Girlfriend Experience, Contagion. He just comes out with something that's like, oh man, yeah, Soderbergh, he's the man. Yeah. But then a couple movies come out and you're like, it's all right. Or, you know, this is, But with No Sudden Move, I am super into this movie, which stars, Don Cheadle. Don Cheadle's the star of this movie. I mean, it's kind of playing itself up as a two-hander, more of an ensemble, but this is Don Cheadle's movie for sure.
Well, it's him reuniting with Don Cheadle and Benicio del Toro, because I don't think he's worked with either of them in a good while. I don't think he's worked with Don Cheadle since the Ocean's movies, and then I don't know if he's done anything with Benicio del Toro since Che. That was like not
that it comes to mind. And he likes to bring actors back for sure. So it's, you know, it's not a surprise to see them, but it does feel kind of like it's been a while because the Che movies, those are a while back.
That was like 2008 or something. 2009.
2008, I think. Yeah, you're right. But both of them. But yeah, so No Sudden Move, like you've already alluded, Don Cheadle, Benicio del Toro, they're kind of like the two main characters here, but we also have David Harbour, John Hamm, Amy Seimetz, Brendan Fraser, Kieran Culkin, Noah Jupe, Julia Fox, Ray Liotta, the legendary Bill Duke, Craig Grant, I think this is his last movie because he passed away.
Yeah.
This cast, Frankie Shaw, almost forgot Frankie Shaw. This cast is like, when I was watching this movie and it started, because I went into this completely fresh. The only thing I knew was that Don Cheadle and Benicio del Toro were in it, and it was Steven Soderbergh. And I only knew that because of the thumbnail. Like, that's kind of what I went in knowing. I also had a vague idea that it might be like a heist movie, but I don't think that really is what this ultimately is. But when this movie starts, and like it goes through the cast, it was one of those moments where I was like, oh, okay, this is one of those movies where I'm going to be
McMahon meme where your like face gets more and more animated as it goes along.
Yeah, well, it's like the Family Guy meme where I was like, oh. It's like that, but none of the like sad ones.
Yeah, I think the Vince McMahon meme is more fitting, but I know you don't watch wrestling, so it's fine.
I had to put my own spin on it. Yeah, sorry.
Sure. But yeah, I mean, I was more familiar with the cast, but the big thing for me was just like, it's Brendan Fraser, baby. And I knew he wasn't the lead, but it's like, Brendan's back. I know he's on Doom Patrol and stuff, but I haven't watched it.
Yeah.
So it's just like,
I almost didn't recognize him. He shows up early in the film, but I was like, wait, what? I know that man.
Yeah. Well, that's what's exciting for me watching Brendan Fraser in this movie is that like it feels like it's the next phase of his career. Like Hollywood's finally accepting him again. He's going to do like the new Darren Aronofsky movie. I think he's the lead of it. And it just feels like he's kind of in this like character actor mode of his career, which feels very exciting. And I'm certainly welcoming it with open arms. So very happy to see him in this film. And I think he's quite good in it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, he has like a cameo in the G.I. Joe movie. I think that's the last movie I kind of remember from him. Because I think he voiced an animated character in like one of those like DreamWorks Sony films. I forget which one. And I think he was in Gimme Shelter. Huh?
Oh yeah, that's right. Was he in the Nut Job?
Was it the Nut Job? He voiced a character.
Yeah.
I think that was it. Yeah, with Gabriel Iglesias and Will Arnett and all them.
If you say so. Yeah.
It's been a while. I was like
Katherine
7
Heigl.
years ago, I want to say.
Yeah.
I think like the last like big-ish movie where he was like the lead, I think was Escape from Planet Earth. Do you remember that movie? I think it was the sequel to Journey to the Center of the Earth.
Well, who could forget Furry Vengeance, which was a film that I think has been forgotten in the laurels of cinema, and probably for good reason.
Well, Furry Vengeance, that was before Escape from Planet Earth, because Furry Vengeance, that's like 2010, 2011. I think.
But Escape from Planet Earth is an animated film. I'm talking just like live action. He was a lead.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Like in Furry Vengeance, then is it Extraordinary Measures, the movie he did with Harrison Ford? I think that was like the same year.
Yeah, it's around the same time. Yeah, Kerry Russell's in that movie too, right?
Sure, but I don't remember that movie. I don't remember Extraordinary Measures at all, and I've tried to forget Furry Vengeance over the years. But the one thing I do remember about both films is that was like the end of Brendan Fraser, the star of movies, period. Then, like you say, he did like animated work. Then he like disappeared for a while, and then people were like, where's Brendan Fraser? And, like we were seeing these like photos and it was sad. And there was like that really sad article with him. And then like Doom Patrol kind of brought him back. And now he's like doing movies again. And it's just like, yes, he's back. You love to see it. And I mean, I hope it leads to a very proactive second phase of his career.
Technically, he was, before Doom Patrol, he was already that character, but I think just the voice of that character in that other DC show Titans. I think he had like he was in an episode about the Doom Patrol, and then they turned that into a show, and that's when Doom Patrol like kind of took off. Because I think that show, it's still going on. That show for sure has been getting like really good notices of like, oh hey, you gotta watch Doom Patrol. Have you seen Doom Patrol? And you haven't seen Doom Patrol? Check it out. And I wonder, because HBO Max, right? It's connected to like the DC stuff. I wonder how that, yeah.
I would not be surprised if that led to the film being picked up by them.
Yeah, because I think this movie was like, I want to say it was like 2019, because I looked after the fact. And from what I could see, Soderbergh announced this film back in 2019, back when Doom Patrol was coming out. So I think that's probably the chain of events. That's my educated guess based on my like 2 minutes of Google searching. But anyway, so No Sudden Move. It is a grimy period crime thriller. It takes place in 1954. I don't want to say too much about the plot, but I'll just say a couple of gangsters in Detroit get caught up in this massive criminal conspiracy. I shouldn't say massive. It's so grounded. Like, it's never too big. It's never like out of its own control, right?
It's centralized to a few key characters, almost in like a term that gets overused a lot by like a Coen Brothers sort of way, where it's just like kind of like an avalanche of events.
Haphazard criminals. Yeah,
like just kind of like, it's like people being connected through like just like misdeeds or just like stuff that they shouldn't have been doing in the first place, and then other people who are just like kind of honing in on that, and just like like I said, sort of avalanches into like a big thing from minor beginnings. And just generally like some people's like at least one person's stupidity kind of just bleeds into like a whole mess of things by the end.
Yeah, it's like you need a backup plan for the backup plan kind of movie. I was thinking of I'm Your Woman a bunch, which is, that's a 70s period thriller, but it felt like that same sort of like, hey, let's make a crime thriller, set it in a different decade. Kind of like, it's going to take itself seriously, but it's going to be fun too. It's going to have little moments that like spark humanity. It's going to have really good actors that you don't see enough in movies, like that kind of thing. I mean, I guess in this case, Don Cheadle, we've seen him blow up, of course, as War Machine in the Marvel movies. But I want to say, like, before that, he was always kind of, he's always been kind of a side character in a lot of movies. I think like, that comes to mind, the only movie I can think of that he really leads that's like a major movie was like Traitor, maybe. And
Talk to Me.
When did that come out?
2009 or 8.
Was Traitor before that then?
I think Traitor was 2009.
Traitor was like 2008, 2009. So it was around that time?
Yeah, it's around the same time. He was becoming like a lead actor and things and stuff. Then he had the Miles Davis movie, which I like, but I feel like everyone's forgotten that he led and also directed.
I forgot about that, yeah.
But I think it's a good film. I remember liking it. It exceeded my expectations. But Don Cheadle, I think he's just always good. Like, I don't think... It's very rare for me to see a Don Cheadle performance and I think like, oh, he whiffed that. It's just like, I think he brings... A lot of like gravitas, but he's also like an often very like dryly funny actor in a way that I think can sometimes be overlooked. And I think he just generally more often than not really just brings that star presence, and it's nice to see him actually in a lead role again for the first time in a while. I
know he proves in this movie that he sells dialogue and he anchors movies in a very unique way. I mean, we should have known. Yeah, I mean, we did know, but like for example, in Avengers Endgame, I mean, the fact that he can sell a line like, hey, we're all about that superhero life, and just do it in a way that doesn't make everyone in the audience cringe. You know what I mean?
The Iron Man 2 line where he's just like, I'm here.
Yeah.
Get over, like,
because he got recasted. He's like, I'm here. It's done. Let's just move on with it. And it's like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
One of the great Marvel recastings that I think really worked out for everybody involved, including Terrence Howard. But yeah, for this movie, like I said before, it's a big ensemble, but this movie never forgets who's at the center of it. And you have him with Benicio del Toro too, which kind of, with del Toro, I think the big surprise of this movie is that initially you think like, okay, it's Del Toro kind of doing a character he's done several times, maybe like a combination of his Sicario character with like, you know, like a little bit of it. Yeah, he's kind of merging a few things here. But as the movie goes on, I was thinking a little bit of like Usual Suspects too, actually. But as the movie goes on, you're like, oh, he's almost playing in a weird way against type. And it's kind of fascinating to see from him. And I think everybody in this movie has like a moment, which at least one moment where you're like, this actor, like when they're with the right director, like David Harbour. I haven't seen Black Widow yet. Things fell through. Didn't see Black Widow with the rest of the film critic community that's been like, all the reviews are already out. But I know people have been talking about David Harbour in that movie being kind of one of the things about it that is actually pretty decent. And I've been hearing pretty negative things about Black Widow for the most part. Mixed, I guess. But David Harbour, I've been hearing great stuff. Like, he's just somebody, like, people love him from Stranger Things. People love him from, what's that other... He was in something else kind of recently, but it's escaping me.
Hellboy?
Was it? Yeah, it was Hellboy. And I remember, terrible movie, but I thought his performance in that was definitely better than expected, at least for me.
Yeah, I thought no fault of the movie belonged to him, in my opinion.
Exactly. Yeah, that's how I feel. But yeah, just what do you think of this cast? I've belabored it for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to complain. The only performance that, in my opinion, didn't quite work for me. And
okay.
Do you agree with this or not?
Okay. We're about to find out.
All right. I don't think Julia Fox is very good in this.
I knew it. I was watching this movie and I was like, oh, I really like this performance. I really like Julia Fox in this. Will's going to hate it. I knew it.
So what surprised me about it was that, like, I mean, obviously, you know, there's Uncut Gems and she explodes from there. And it's just like, if there's one director she should be working with, it's Soderbergh, because he is just prone to like working with, you know, like untraditional actors and like people who like aren't, you know, always just like in the limelight. He tends to gravitate towards those type of performers because they give more naturalistic type of performances. And I feel like this performance, it always just felt like stressed upon in a way that never felt natural. And I guess in some ways, it's sort of intentional given how things turn out. But I just never found it to be really honest. Like it had that kind of like high school quality to it where it just like all the lines get delivered like this. And it took me out of the film because everyone else is doing such good work that it just...
You're wrong about this one, Will. Well, not wrong.
A lot of people agree with me on this. So, and they're actually a lot harsher on it than I am. I don't think she's quite as bad as some people are saying.
My thing with her in this movie, and I totally disagree. I think that part of her character, and I don't want to say too much, is that a lot of what she's doing in this movie is sort of putting on an act and being a certain way to get across a certain thing and to do a certain thing. And I will agree with you. At first, I was like, oh gosh, like this feels stilted. It feels a little bit like I don't quite understand what's going on with this character. I don't understand why she's delivering her lines like that, but I never thought it was like unintentionally amateurish. I always kind of felt like there was a facade, like a double-edged facade.
There is at times, I think, but I don't think she really sells it. That's where I think we disagree.
I think she pulls it off, but of course it's subjective.
Yeah, because like when the like facade starts to break, it never felt like, oh wow, like I couldn't see us coming. It's just like, all right, so we got to this point already. Because like I don't know, like it's a type of performance that I think needs to be really layered and complex, and I just don't think she really brings it with this film. And that comes from a place of disappointment because I felt like she would be a great fit for Soderbergh. And like I said, I've only seen this film and that from her, so you know I don't want to like say anything about her as an actress in general. I'm just saying I think this might have just been, at least at this point, a fluke. Maybe she'll bounce back in the next one.
Don't spook the producers who listen to our show. They're like, sure. Ashton and Grony weren't into it, eh? We can't put her in all these other movies.
I just thought she was like the one performance that never quite clicked into place for me. Mainly because like I think everyone else is like good to great in this. Especially as you were saying. Okay. Like Don Cheadle is very good in this. David Harper, I think, is really good in this. I think Amanda Simons
So good in this.
I think she's really good in this.
She takes a performance, or she takes a character who normally would just be such an afterthought, for the script, but she just you could tell she brought her notes with her.
Yeah. And as you were mentioning before, Bill Duke, fantastic.
Oh my goodness.
And
so wonderful
Brendan
to see
Fraser.
him on screen.
Yeah.
Everybody in here is pretty strong, I think. I think. Okay, I will say though, and I kind of like what Ray Liotta was doing in this. I think it was.
I actually thought he was quite good in this.
It's nicely balanced. Yeah, I was like, you're expecting one thing, you get a different. I thought Kieran Culkin had a good energy in this. Mm-hmm. I wish we had gotten a little bit more, but yeah.
I think they're both aware that they're in the movie for this amount of time without giving anything away, and they can go to this pitch. Because they're not the leads, they're firmly in supporting, so they both have the liberty of kind of chewing it up in that pulpy way, but not overdoing it. Because Soderbergh is good about reining those type performances in. Traditionally, there are exceptions, of course, like Meryl Streep in The Laundromat, but
yeah. See, that's the thing. People need to give Julia Fox the Soderbergh curve. They're like, well, look at Meryl Streep, and what happened there.
Well, that's the weird thing about Meryl Streep. I don't want to belabor the laundromat conversation, but the thing about that is that Meryl Streep gives one of her best and worst performances in that movie. It's very bizarre, but whole other discussion.
Good point. And look, if we're gonna talk about a performance for me that didn't quite work all of the time, the only one I'm gonna look at, and I hate to say this, my beloved John Hamm.
Oh, really? I thought he was quite good.
I thought he had one good scene. And it's a scene between him and the Noah Jupe character.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah. This is John Hamm. This is Don Draper. This is the guy. Because when you first see him, you're like, oh, okay, all right. He's back in, it's the 50s, not the 60s. But, in Mad Men, we see him in the 50s all the time in flashbacks.
Yeah. He's got that square jaw. Mm-hmm. He's working the hat.
No nonsense ad executive. Thinks he's the smartest guy in the room. Is probably right about that. In this movie, I thought he was fine. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, he's the detective. And I was waiting for something. I was waiting for a moment with his character where I'm like, okay, now he's going to ham it up. No pun intended. I just mean his last name, just, in its own way.
I got you.
But they do something with his character. And I'm like, well, hold on. I'm okay with that. Sure, it's this kind of movie. That's fine. But his performance isn't, it's not aligned. It's wait, but you were this, and how do you... What? No. No. Another actor would have done it better, I think. Or I think that he didn't get the right notes.
I don't know. I think he's doing, not to the same extent, but basically kind of like a J.K. Simmons and Burn After Reading kind of thing, where it's it's supposed to be built up to something more, or you think it is, but then where it leads to is just oh, no, it's just leading to this. It's like a fake out, basically. And I think that's very deliberate. And I appreciate it, but I can see what you mean.
Yeah, I was just a little disappointed because I was expecting a little bit more, and I think I just let myself, get too hyped up. I thought everybody else in here is pretty strong. I think Noah Jupe is strong in this too, and there were a couple of newcomers. There were a couple of new faces that I wasn't as familiar with. So I think I looked for her name in the credits, and I'm blanking on what her name is, but the actor who plays Dawn, the secretary. Do you remember that character?
Oh, Frankie Shaw?
Was that Frankie Shaw? No, I'm not thinking of Dawn. I'm thinking of somebody else. I'm thinking of the guy. Oh no, I'm losing it. It was a different secretary, wasn't it? Was it the secretary of Forbert? That might have been who I'm thinking of.
I don't know who you're referring to then.
We'll just let it go then. I don't know.
Right.
I'll have to find the cast list eventually. And no, but there's something that happens with her character involving a blanket, where I was just like, oh my gosh.
Oh, I know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
That's a good scene.
Yeah, Dawn is the secretary who works for this is the wife of a certain character, but okay.
Yeah.
I have it all mixed around. But that's not to say that the movie's too confusing. I will say there were times where I was like, I don't really know what's going on, but I don't really care.
Well,
I was just I knew enough.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's sort of almost intentional here, right? It's just that I think he is so clued in. Well, that's the thing, right? It's we know from past experiences that Soderbergh's really good about summing complicated things down to their kind of baseline specifics, something for instance, the Ocean's movies, or The Informant, or more recently like Logan Lucky. Like they can kind of take plots that may have been convoluted and they just like are very like streamlined in a way that's effective while not like sacrificing the characters. And I think this film, I think it's just so focused on like having like a mood and a rhythm that it doesn't really mind that it's kind of like complex and verbose in certain ways. Like I think it's kind of adding to like that like heady pulpiness that's going for in a sort of retro fashion. And I can see why some people aren't going to dig it, but I think that added to the sort of sophistication of it that doesn't mind not like sugar feeding things to you, that like a lot of character dynamics kind of rely on some subtleties. Like you kind of have to infer what's going on between like different lesions and stuff like that, while also, you know, getting enough here where you can kind of follow. But I do agree with you that there were some times where I was, especially towards the like third act, where I was kind of losing track of like what exactly was going on with who and why this was important for that and stuff like that. And I think almost like the MacGuffin, quote unquote, that is in here is like almost like an afterthought, sort of. Like it's just like it's kind of like a means to an end, sort of, in a way that I think if it was stressed upon a little bit more, it might have been a little bit more impactful to have a scene like there is in here. But yeah, no, I agree and disagree, I guess is what I'm trying to say here.
I agree with a lot of what you're saying. You know, funny enough, I do think that like what you're saying to the point of like, I guess like the way that exposition is kind of handled in this movie, and like it's not that it's a weird thing, is because like the way that they deliver these lines where they're like, well, Aldrich Watkins would never say that. I'm like, you're right, he would never say that. But like they haven't really given me a reason. Like they don't do exposition in a way of like, well, Watkins believes this because this thing happened to him and he did this thing. Instead, it's just sort of very matter of fact, and it feels a little bit more organic, and it feels more of like, okay, this is how these characters, with the information they have at this given time, this is how they are going to communicate with each other. All that stuff really works for me. So I think that's why like even when I was confused and I was a little bit of like, wait, what's the plan? I was always along for the ride. I didn't care. I was just sort of, I was more focusing on what I wanted to focus on, which was, you know, the actual performances, a lot of the cinematography, a lot of the production design, which was really strong. The camera work was interesting. It was kind of this very stylistic, the fisheye thing, but the fisheye, like they kind of took the favorite kind of thing that Yorgos Lanthimos did, but they kind of added like this kind of rectangular filter to the edges. It's hard to describe, but it's different. Well,
my thing about it is that I think it looked cool when anyone was in the center of the frame. Whenever like characters like the camera tilted or panned and like they became blurry, that's where it felt like, okay, I don't really care when it's like the characters are distorted and it feels like, you know, like they're like kind of becoming like a House of Mirrors sort of look.
Yeah, I was thinking like almost like a one plane kaleidoscope in a weird way.
And if like, I don't know, like if it has a dramatic purpose and I just missed it, but it kind of felt like it was just more for like establishing the style or the Soderbergh-isms of it. And so if it was just like for the pure vibes, I guess it was just kind of a mixed bag for me. But if it is something deliberate to the plot and I'm just missing it, then I'll have to admit my ignorance.
There'll probably be a video essay on YouTube, you know, that just sort of like explains it, and you're like, you're right, yeah, that's what it was. But I think for me, there were times where I was trying to figure it out. I was like, okay, clearly he's trying to make sure everybody's in the frame. And a way to do that is like to get them in the frame, but also to capture like this room and how claustrophobic it is. It's a way to sort of make sure that you see everyone's expressions on their faces at the same time when a key moment happens. So like when you're panning over and you're seeing someone get into a car, you can see the way that the person is sort of seeing a situation that's about to happen. There were other times where I think it was trying to capture like the desperation of certain characters, how they feel a little off tilt, how they feel like they're in the scene, but like nobody really is like paying attention to them almost. It was stuff like that. I was like, okay, like I'm with you, movie. I kind of get where you're going for there. So I was into it for the most part, but I'll agree that there were times where it was making me think too much about the movie instead of thinking about the movie, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I didn't mind it whenever a character was in the center of the frame during those shots, but anytime a character kept walking and the camera made them like a funny looking version of themselves, it took me out of it, because I'm thinking about the shot and not like the characters in the shot in that respect. And the fact that it keeps going back and forth between like a traditional shot and something that's a little bit like funny looking is admittedly pretty distracting.
I think overall this thing is very restrained, contained. It's got really great set piece moments, but it's simple and it's elegant, well timed, very what you see, what you get. I'm a B+ on this one. I think it's a really satisfying little caper, and I'm really glad I saw it. Really glad it was such a surprise, because I didn't have high expectations for this based on the fact that I heard nothing about it. I had no trailers, not really any word of mouth, and I just sat down and was like, yeah, I'll watch this movie. It's on HBO Max. Why not? And I ended up being like, oh, I really dig this. I really, really like what Soderbergh is doing here, and I'm very, very excited for what this could possibly do for Don Cheadle's career and like being more of a leading man. And then, you know, like we mentioned already, like Brendan Fraser and everybody here. Julia Fox, who I know you're a big fan of her performance in this movie. Sorry, I'll stop. But okay, Will, what did you think of No Sudden Move? What's your final grade?
Yeah, I mean, I had more expectations certainly than you did. I always tend to seek out the Soderbergh movies, and like I said before, I think by and large, at least 3 out of 4 times I tend to like, if not love them. In recent years, I think his stuff outside of retirement, like anything after the Nick, I've been more like than love. I think a lot of it has been more about him experimenting with style as opposed to really getting something fully enriched in terms of like what he wants to communicate with the text. And I think there are exceptions. Like I think, as you were mentioning before, like High Flying Bird is good. Logan Lucky is good. I think Unsane is a kind of pulpy throwback, but also having some fun things that's trying to communicate. But yeah, I haven't fully loved, I think, anything that he's done. I think this is probably the closest I have of the recent stuff, maybe. Like I said, maybe outside of Logan Lucky. But yeah, I think when I was watching it, I was fully about it. And like I said, I love the editing of it. I really like the world building, that it's able to be contained and focused, but also it has a really enriched sense perspective. And I like that the characters are fleshed out, but we don't fully get to understand all of them at the same time. But it does feel like a lot of thought was put into it in a kind of pulpy novelistic sense. And I think generally when it works, it's really firing in all cylinders, and it's very cracking, and it's easy to enjoy. But I also kind of find myself, as I step away from it, not really thinking as much about the substance of the film and thinking more about the style choices and like what it's able to do from a stylistic and acting standpoint. And I guess the themes of the film haven't really stuck with me as much as I would hope, unfortunately. So I still like the film a good bit. I'd give it a high B, but I feel like it's kind of missing that one thing similar to Zola that really kind of pushes it over the edge into something a little bit better. But all around a good film, and definitely a solid streaming watch. One that I'm a little disappointed that didn't go to theaters, because I think it would have been a fun one to watch on the big screen outside of the weird camera angles. So yeah, a good film. Definitely one I would recommend.
All right. I think some people got to see it at Tribeca. So some people got to see it on the big screen. Lucky them.
And I think, were there some other drive-in shows I've heard?
Not that I know of.
Okay,
that would have been really
great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Make it fun driving. But yeah, that is No Sudden Move. Very, very entertaining flick. It's just one of those movies. Like, it literally ends with one of those like final paragraphs where, to the point where I was like, wait, that's what this was about? I didn't even catch that. Which I found kind of funny. Sure. I was like, oh yeah, that's what this was about. Yeah, I knew that. Mm-hmm. But that, regardless, I think this one's really fun to watch. And yeah, the fact that you can access it pretty easily, definitely one of the better films we talked about this week, I think, although Summer of Soul really took the prize, I think, mm-hmm. in terms of my favorite film that's out this week, as we happen to be talking about. But that is No Sudden Move. It is 115 minutes long, just under 2 hours. And with that, we're done. I'm tired, but we talked about a lot of films this week, mm-hmm. but we have a big one next week. We have Black Widow, which is going to be in, I think, theaters and Disney Plus Premiere Access. We also have Gunpowder Milkshake. I think that's next week as well. And,
yeah, on Netflix.
Yep, that'll be hitting Netflix along with Fear Street Part 2, 1978. So, Will, this is your chance to catch up on the Fear Street. Go ahead and get in the block. The neighborhood's waiting for you.
Sure.
All right. That's it for our show this week. Thanks for listening to this extra long episode of the show. Happy July 4th weekend to all of you stateside, and to the rest of you, happy weekend in general.
Yeah.
We'll see you next week. Signing off from the Internet California, I'm John Negroni.
And for Internet Pennsylvania, I'm Washington.
See you next time.